So first we're going to have a report from iPlan, and then we're going to have a presentation from the proponent. And then I'm going to read a statement of the chair, like the last one we did at the Lester Center, that outlines the kind of the orders in terms of how we do a public hearing. And then we'll let the public have comment again. And then from there, we'll move into a regular meeting after this where council will make some deliberations tonight. So what I'll do is I'll get Mr. Buchan to get us started for the evening, and then we'll pass it off to the proponent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I'll just give an introduction to the bylaw. The purpose of bylaw 3475 is to allow a 22.5 meter high building providing 70 apartments on the subject property. 12 of these apartment units would be exclusively used for seniors housing. The Lacs Kw'alaams WAAP Housing Society has applied to rezone the properties from the current R2 zone to an RM2 multifamily zone. The applicant proposes to develop 70 affordable homes to serve the Lacs Kw'alaams community. And this would include a mix of studio units, accessible studio units, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom adaptable units. A traffic impact study by McElhaney Engineering was conducted to assess the impact of the development. In response to the study, the applicant has agreed to undertake a number of traffic measures, including installing a stop sign at the point of access, installing no parking signs as recommended in the study, developing and implementing a traffic management procedure for the construction phase, installing a sidewalk east of 11th Avenue along the property frontage. They will restrict 12 of the units to seniors housing only to reduce parking demand and to provide some on-street parking stalls. They'll also provide secure sheltered bike parking near the front access. These measures will be secured through a Section 219 covenant. In addition to the above traffic measures, the proponent and staff have met to discuss an additional measure to address some of the concerns that have been expressed about speeding and sight lines at the Edward and 11th Avenue intersection. Even though the traffic impact study concluded the level of service at this intersection was not a problem, the applicant has agreed that they would pay for the construction of curb extensions, bump outs, and a crosswalk at this location, which would encourage lower speeds and improve sightlines and pedestrian safety. This feature would be constructed by the city through a local service area initiative and paid back through an annual charge by the property owner on the property. The design for this feature is included in the September 14th, 2021 report from McElhaney. The applicant's design team and representatives are present and will provide an overview of their proposal. And I think that Ms. Nesbitt will start with that.
Welcome. You go ahead. I'm not sure if there's a shared screen functionality. If you need do you have like a slideshow at all, or are you just speaking to the project?
I'm going to need to know who they would like to unmute. There's several of them on the line.
It's Heidi Nesbitt.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thanks, Rosa. Yes, I do need to share screen. Let me just see if I can do that now. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah, that's good.
So I'm going to, my name is Heidi Nesbitt. I'm an architect with Human Studio, and together with Michael Green Architecture, we have been working on this project for a couple of years now. As most of you know, we presented this to council and the public at the public hearing about a month ago. Since then, as Rob Buchan mentioned, we've made some changes to the intersection to help enhance traffic safety and particularly slow drivers down, increase visibility. In case there are people who did not see our presentation last time, and also just to refresh everyone's memory, I'm going to quickly go through the slideshow and a little bit, not in quite as much detail. Of course, we are here to answer any questions at all about the project, but we'll focus a little bit more on the traffic and safety. We also have with us, in addition to several members from our team at Human Studio and Michael Green Architecture, we have Glenn Stanker from McElhaney, who has done the majority of the work on the traffic impact study and subsequent redesign of that intersection. So I will get him when we get to that point to speak a little bit more about the work that he has done. So the Loch Columns Housing Project as Rob mentioned, there's 70 units of housing for Loch Columns band members. Funding provided primarily by BC Housing with a land agreement from the city. The location is familiar to most people on 11th Ave, directly across from Edward Ave. The background of the project really quickly. So we've been working, like I said, for 2, maybe even almost 3 years at this point with members of the band through the Housing Society and Mustafa, who's here as a representative, and I believe Harvey is here as well on this call, and worked with them both to identify this site with the city and also to develop some design principles. This slide just speaks to our experience as an architecture firm working in many small communities across BC with First Nations and other community groups to build housing and community projects. Again, we're here with Michael Green Architecture, who specifically focus on wood projects. They also have a great portfolio of wood construction around the world, and particularly in BC. These were the kind of co-created values that we came up with for the project. Again, with a wide range of stakeholders, I think that we've really stayed true to these throughout the project, despite lots of changes in terms of sort of evolving site requirements due to stream setbacks and, like we said, traffic safety issues. But I think we've really stayed true to our goals of expressing the Loch Columns identity, building community connections, keeping our costs in line with BC Housing's expectations, and respecting the investments that the band and the city has made into this project. And of course, being really sustainable and responsive to the site. This is a really special site to both Loch Columns and to the people living in the area. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. And of course, the design of the building itself, providing an equality of experience to all residents. The context, again, here we are. Site is within Prince Rupert, south of the community of Loch Columns, accessible by boat. Here it is, nestled right in the middle of town, slightly to the north. This shows kind of the walking radius, obviously on this really nice existing trail network. A 5-minute walk takes you pretty much to elementary school, high school, lots of existing transit service, easy access to downtown. So in lots of ways, despite some of the hurdles that we've talked around with the steepness of the site and adjacent stream, this is a really great site in lots of ways. So here we are again, just a reminder, this is a little bit of a panhandle site. So it's a long and narrow site that runs parallel to a stream and has a fairly small access point out to 11th Ave, which has really dictated where we enter the site. Again, because of the steep slope, we do need to have that switchback, both because of possible inclement weather, trying to get in and out of the site safely for residents, also for fire trucks that the fire department limits the kind of slope and turning radius that we can have on that driveway access. So that's really pushed us over to be directly across from Edward Ave. Here we have a little bit of a sense of some of the changes that we've done. I have a better diagram of this coming up. But as I mentioned before, the project entrance is directly across from Edward Ave. We've got this, this kind of looping design that wraps around an upper level of parking. you go around this switchback and get down to a lower level of parking that does gradually go down towards the stream as well. So we're really making the most of the site to have level parking, a level as possible of a building site, not incur super extraneous costs with our site works, and also provide the required environmental riparian setbacks from that stream. Again, just a little dotted line showing the alignment of the intersection, and that we're getting down to about 2.5 stories below grade. So it's not insignificant, the amount of grade that we're dropping to get down to the lowest point of the site. Here's some of the work that McElhaney's been doing in our intermission since we last met with you all. The primary strategy that we've introduced, that they have introduced through their careful study of this area and this site and their in-depth knowledge of traffic calming measures, is to add these traffic bulges to the 4 corners of the intersection. Glenn, maybe I will just take this opportunity, Rosa, if you can unmute Glenn Stanker. I'm going to get him to talk for a moment about the reason that he chose, that his team chose the traffic bulges as the best traffic calming measure for this area.
Of course, he's unmuted now.
So Glenn, do you want to just talk a little bit about how, sort of similar to what we were just talking about how these traffic bulges work and why they were chosen?
Sure, Heidi. Thank you. And Your Worship, Council, this is a very traditional approach to dealing with areas that have a speeding problem. The curb extensions, as they're called, have been around for decades, and the ones that we're applying here come from the Transportation Association of Canada design guidelines that were published in about 1998 and been used extensively across northern BC since. They give the traveling public the sense that the road is narrowing by the bringing in the curbs, and as a result, it slows people down. We have a couple extra benefits that work at this particular location, understanding that aside from the speeding issues raised by the residents, there was also a concern about the sight lines coming out of this, both because of the parked vehicles and the proximity to a retaining wall in the northwest corner. Both of these would also be improved with the creation of these bulbs. And also, of course, with understanding there's transit and pedestrians in the area, especially with the new potential for crossing between the residential areas, this invites a crosswalk at the same location, which the bulbs would give another opportunity to reduce the crossing distance, thereby improving the pedestrian safety as well. So it really is one solution that hits a lot of concerns that were raised with this issue, with this intersection. Your Worship.
Thank you. I think we can pass it back to Heidi though.
Thanks, Rosa. So here we have the legal site boundary again, just a reminder to everyone present here that the P1 area is not being impacted. So this is the green space. There's no plans for future development of that site. The R2 sites directly adjacent to us along 11th Ave are privately owned. So we, as architects and the Loch Wallons Housing Society, don't have control over what happens on those. Right now, they provide a lovely forested backdrop, but those were some questions that came up last time. The forested backdrop behind the site will certainly stay in place. So the design proposal itself, again, here's the context just to refresh everybody's memory. You can see the dotted line at the bottom of the screen here that shows the offset from the small stream. Those are the riparian guidelines, which we are required to respect to ensure fish habitat health. Here we have what we call a cross section through the site that starts on the far left of the screen at 11th Ave. You can see the slope of the site down to the parking at our main building level. And this is cut right through the building entrance. So you can see that it's cutting through the kind of breezeway between the two separate buildings and the amenity space. So what this shows is the relationship with the really amazing forest and stream behind, and the way that this narrow building allows the users to really get the benefit of that natural space. It's a long, narrow building that we think sits quite elegantly in the site, respects the scale of the forest, and is set back quite far from 11th Ave. You can see that we call this what is a single loaded building. So instead of having a traditional apartment development where you would have an enclosed corridor with apartments on either side, everybody has a front door that opens out to the outdoors. And this is really important for health and wellness, as well as connection with the outdoors and with each other, and a real sense of kind of having an independent home. It also allows for natural air and light from both sides of the project, which we think is a really important feature. This is the view looking from Edward Ave across 11th Ave over to the site. Again, noticing that from this perspective, the building really only appears to be about 3.5 stories tall, due to the sloping of the site. The landscape on the left where it says new landscape buffer, that is the area that's within our property lines that we have control over. So we are planning on revegetating that with native species. The other undisturbed forest, again, is private property. But you can see the natural wood and the darker colors and the green really help the project to blend in with its settings. And then I think I have, here's an example of some of the species you'll recognize from your forests in the surrounding area. Here's the landscape plan. Again, this kind of clearly delineates what we have, where our property lines are and where we're revegetating. Down in the lower left, you can see we've planned for a natural play zone. This is a family housing project. And then on the far right, you can see a sports area, also a fire truck turnaround should the fire truck need to come down there, but kind of giving that large paved area a dual purpose. Again, for the parking count, we do have 63 stalls on site. This is in compliance with the municipal bylaws. And as per Rob's comments at the beginning, that is because we have covenanted a certain number of suites for elders. And so that allows us to slightly reduce the parking count because it's anticipated that most of those people won't be driving their own personal vehicles. Here's the unit mix again. Just a reminder that the priority was identified early on that one of the main needs is for family housing, so for those larger units. And BC Housing was really supportive of that need within the community. So we focused on the 3 bedrooms, as well as some capacity again for those elders units that are fully accessible. So they allow wheelchairs or other mobility aids and will allow those residents to age in place and not have to move, hopefully. They also include connecting doors to larger suites to allow that intergenerational living to happen. Again, a sort of unique feature in apartment style living. Here's the unit layouts, just to refresh everybody's memory. The 3-bedroom units on your far left, the darkest orange. So fairly generous. We are limited slightly by BC Housing guidelines and by affordability, but we think that with the windows on both sides and cross ventilation, that these are quite dignified, generous units that'll provide really nice homes for people, down to the 2 one and studio apartments. Again, any questions about any of this, we can go back to these slides after the end of the presentation. So just a reminder about the layout. The top drawing is showing the ground floor plan. The green color is the what we call the gathering space, often known as amenity space. So it has doors that open wide into this central breezeway and a nice connection to the natural play zone down below. We've broken it up into 2 volumes to, again, reduce the massing of this building. And the other thing you can see on these plans is that there's actually 3 stairs that allow for lots of opportunities for easy visiting between levels. So there's also elevators, of course, for people who have strollers or any other reason that they do not want to take 6 flights of stairs. But the open air stairs really allow for and encourage that travel vertically throughout the building. The material palette, taking its inspiration from the really spectacular setting, both within the site and in the larger Prince Rupert area. So lots of natural wood, that green color, really durable materials so that this building will continue to look great over time and not be a drain on the resources of the community. Now I've got a few what we call renderings, so 3D perspective views. This one is a bird's eye view showing that, and sorry, it hasn't fully been updated to reflect the traffic bulges, but what you can see here is two of the traffic bulges. We've now updated that to be all four corners will have those traffic bulges on them. You can see the route wrapping, the driveway wrapping down and around, getting to that basketball court, and then down to the rest of the building. So 6 stories set really quietly into the forest landscape. Here's the view from down 11th Ave. And what you're looking at here is the entrance to the accessible or the handicap ramp that goes down. Looking at the sort of semi-transparent cladding around the outdoor stair there with an opportunity for artwork from the community. A little bit of a closer view looking at the natural materials and the real transparency and openness of the project. Really high quality, durable materials that blend in with the natural setting. This is down right at grade here as you approach the building, coming into that parking area and looking right at the front entrance. So you can see just lots of opportunity for life, lots of opportunity for social interactions. Something we're really passionate about is kind of personal health and wellness and enhancing opportunities for social interactions. So this kind of overlook and open areas and lots of front doors walking right out. It also improves the safety to have all these kind of eyes on the street. And then from Hayes Creek, looking back up at the project, you can see some of the finer detail we're working on. And that's it. So I can flip back to any of those slides that anyone has. We just finished a small Q&A session as well. I should let everybody know, where we answered a few community questions about the specifics of the traffic. We're happy to go over all of that in any detail that anybody would need. So I will pass that back over. I'm going to stop sharing so we can all see each other.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah.
So now we'll move into the portion where the public gets to have a chance to speak. Before I do that, I'm just going to read out the statement of the chair for a public hearing. Before I do that, just so everyone's aware on City Council's role here is as land regulators, we when people apply for rezonings, we also have to collect all the information from proponents and from the community. So this public hearing is about us listening to you and listening to the public's feedback, your comments and your concerns. We're not the proponent of this project. You just heard from the proponent. Our job is to hear from you on why you feel strongly or not strongly about a project like this. So we won't be entertaining a debate with members of the community here. We're just here to hear your concerns. If you have questions, the proponent will do their best to address them and have been doing their best to address them. This is the second public hearing we're doing for this project, which is the first time we've done this in the 8 years that I've been mayor. Is another opportunity for the community to have a chance to have a say. So that the questions that were outstanding from the last meeting were being addressed. And so those reports and things like that were brought out to the community. So I just want to make sure that that is clear, what our role is. So I'll start with the statement of the chair, and then Ms. Miller will be collecting kind of a list of people that want to speak. So if you want to speak, you can. I'm not sure what the best way they do that is. That they put that in the chat there, Ms. Miller?
I actually have the chat disabled, so if they just raise their hand, I can note them down.
Okay, in Zoom, there's a little reaction. I think it's under reactions. You just hit raise hand, and then we'll start making a list from that. So a public hearing is organized under Section 890 of the Local Government Act. Every person present who believes that their interest in the property affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. No one will be discouraged or prevented from making their views known. However, comments will be restricted to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. A person may make their statement in writing as outlined in the public notice, and if received by the deadline, that their presentation will be read by the corporate administrator at the public hearing. If a person wishes to make a presentation at the public hearing, they are welcome to do so, provided that the following criteria are followed in order to allow for the recording of the public hearing process. The chairperson will recognize only those individuals who present themselves to the corporate administrator. Presenters shall be provided with 5 minutes to address council. Prior to speaking, please provide your full name and be prepared to spell your surname for the corporate administrator. Please also provide your residential or business address. Should you wish to read us from a prepared statement, the city will require a copy for reference purposes to the corporate administrator. This is not a question period at which a debate takes place. City Council will not provide any comments on issues raised, but will be in attendance to listen to the comments presented. Should no additional speakers present themselves, the chair will call 3 times for anyone else to speak to the matter, and if no one else comes forward, the public hearing will be adjourned. After the public hearing has adjourned, the council may, without further notice, give whatever effect council believes proper to the representations made at this hearing. So now that being said, I'll call on anyone who wishes to speak to the project. So just put your hand emoji up, or if you want to raise your hand to the camera, if you can't figure that part out, we'll do that as well. And Ms. Miller will start taking a list of people who want to say or ask questions or mention their concerns. Again, if the emoji thing is not working, just there's a hand there, Vanessa.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. My name is Vanessa Anderson. I live at 980 Edward Avenue. So my driveway will be opposite of the proponent's driveway. I was at the proponent's info session at 4:30, and I have some concerns about the density, just the amount of people that we're putting in such a small spot across the way. I know their solution to the traffic was the bulges. I'm not certain that that's going to be sufficient. I'd like to actually thank Barry. He actually came here and drove around our circle and experienced what we do on a daily basis when we come and go. So he understands what we're dealing with when we leave Edward and try and make a left to go up 11th with that retaining wall. And I'm really not certain that the bulges are going to do that. And then now we're adding a crosswalk there. So my concern is now I need to worry about traffic coming both ways on a busy street, and then probably cars parked. However, I've been told that they would be 5 to 7 meters back, and now I have to worry about pedestrians crossing there as well with no sort of controlled light or anything. So, that is a concern of mine, especially when there's going to be families down there. So we're looking at probably anywhere from 200 to 300 or more people. So that's a huge amount of volume in such a small spot. My also concern is the building itself looks absolutely beautiful. However, the exterior doors, I'm worried about the noise factor with that. I think that's something that could be, tweaked. I'm not sure how the architect feels about that, but, because in our backyard and stuff, I know we get a lot of street noise. So I'm thinking now if I have, another 70 doors and people, and, I can just imagine how noisy it's going to be. I also feel like on that site, because 11th is so busy, there should be an additional exit or entrance other than the one just on Edward. I think when you get that sort of density of people there should be a way to alleviate traffic other than just always forcing it out onto 11th from Edward on their side. And I know a traffic study was done in March of this year. I'm a little disappointed with that, to be perfectly honest. I think it should have been done over, 2 or 3 different months, a week out of 1 month, a week out of, maybe a summer month, and now into the fall and stuff. Because I think if you do it just over one specific time, I don't really know if you get a true taste of what traffic is like here. So I'm not opposed to the project. I would like to see it scaled back a bit. I would like to see maybe 40 units instead of like 70. And I guess my final comment is the 63 parking spaces. Are those 63 parking spaces including visitor parking? Are we relying on the street for visitor parking? If so, I don't really think that that's a great idea on busy 11th. And that's really all I'd like to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Okay, we'll go to the next speaker, please.
James and Kayla Daniele, I just requested you to unmute if you'd like to proceed.
Hello.
There you go.
Perfect.
Thank you. We're just ushering little boys off to hockey. Sorry about that. Evening, everybody. So we had my wife will be back in a sec. Sorry. I haven't had a question that I posed to at the last forum here. I haven't had a question answered yet on anything that I delivered that night. So I'm just curious, as to, obviously my points I brought up. I heard earlier the architect mentioned that she's been speaking with the community and the like, and I really would wager to say that she's been speaking more with City Hall rather than the community. I think that as a neighborhood, we know as much as the city citizens, which, I'm not saying isn't anything, but I don't know that, specifically the people in the surrounding area have any more information, have any more voice than anyone else. And not to say that everyone isn't entitled. But, when we were talking, or when I mentioned about the variance applications that I had to go through, and that radius was going to be increased to 200 meters for this project. To my knowledge, nothing has happened as far as letters being sent out or any type of questioning to the surrounding neighborhood. I've along with everybody, I take it the neighborhood kind of personally, I guess, just because I'm not a resident as such. I'm kind of this would-be homeowner type thing, in the fact that I've been building the house there for 10 years now plus, and I'm glad my wife's out of the room for this. But point is, there was a level of almost guilt in the last one that I had, considering what was said, and I can't argue what points people were making, because I concur. But when I started my house 10 years ago, my little brother and I that lives next to me, this wasn't the plan. And I realized, progress is change, and that's fine. But even when, there was the Prince Rupert 2.0 and what have you, it was never a consideration that we would have a 6-story, or, from the street only see 4.5 stories or what have you, in our neighborhood. And so, although, in my cheap ways, I can say that, like my outlay financially isn't humongous. I've got a decade plus of weekends and spare time and everything in my life that has been put to this creation of a family place for us to live, if you will. That was pretty uneloquent of me, but my point is, it seems to me that we have an absolute vested interest in this, and yet when the process is being laid out, and it's not really consistent with what we've experienced for our property. Again, my question to everyone was, in the event that Lac Salams goes to sell the property, who is to say what becomes of that property, what what condition it's allowed to maybe deteriorate to. And I realize that these are possibilities, not for sure, but the potential exists. And when, I'm going to get carried out of this house for sure. I'm going to live there until I cannot live anymore. And when my kids go to sell that house, I question the possibility of the house being worth less because the project here has gone sideways. And I'm not suggesting that's going to happen, but I am suggesting that there is potential there. And it sounds like there is no guarantee that they have to continue ownership till the end of time. As far, I hope you understand what I'm saying. So again, are our taxes going to reflect this? Like in 25 years from now, if my house is in fact worth less money, that's coming out of my pocket. So it's got nothing to do with, my right to own a house or what have you. It's got to do with my personal investment in it. Again, like my brother and I did it with our two hands. We didn't hire a contractor, and not to say that I need a high five or I own it more or less. I'm just saying the fact is there is an investment there, be it financial, be it physical, be it time away from my family, what have you. And I'm trying to achieve something here. And I feel like the possibility is there that it will be lessened. I don't know, nor does anyone, what this thing is going to look like in 25 years from now. That's my concern. Is our quality of life going to be affected? We don't know that. Is my wallet, is my wife's wallet, is our finances going to be affected by this thing? No answer on that. Again, the radius of the letters, nothing happened there, right? My question on the taxation, nothing. I still don't know anything. Dimensions, like dimensionally, how big is this place? How close is it to my property? Still don't have any of that information. Like with the community, I don't know about that. To me, the community is everyone, right? Like those that have a vested interest in what's going to happen should speak at the rezoning thing. Like I appreciate, the designer and they're speaking, but building materials to me is something for the neighborhood. Yeah, it'll beautify the neighborhood and that whole thing. But, we're going till 7:00 and half an hour of it was to talk about the design features of the building. And I realize they're supposed to be talking or giving a presentation rather to council and mayor. But to me, it's taking time away from citizens that want to speak. Thank you for your time, guys. That's what I got.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker, please.
You're unmuted, Cody.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, for sure.
Thanks for having me, guys. Few things I'd like to bring up, and I've been asked by a few. I live on 960 Edward Avenue. I've been asked by a few of my neighbors to speak for them. So I don't talk for my entire neighborhood, but I talk for at least half of them. And the fact that we're even in an open hearing still a month after the first open hearing is kind of a joke to me, because the questions that were posed to you guys, council, in the first meeting were very simple. They were traffic related, they were environmental related. These are answers that you guys should have had off the bat, and you didn't. And it's ridiculous to me. Now, You guys brought up in your little presentation today the traffic. What do you call it? Bulges, and you think that's going to make a difference? Our street is so narrow already that turning with a regular vehicle is already dangerous, especially when it's foggy, when it's rainy, which, you know what, those are weather phenomena we have very regularly here. You want to add less room, you're asking for a nightmare. That's your answer to the question. Makes me question this whole process. The fact that you didn't have answers to these questions in the beginning is ridiculous. But to have traffic bulges, that's a dumb answer to a ridiculous question. So there's got to be a different design for that. To have the location for this building at the crossroads of Edward and 11th with a crosswalk and traffic bulges you're creating a bulge so somebody can run their car into a bulge instead of a person. And that's ridiculous. So I'll leave that question at that. That's got to be a redesign because that's just stupid. Second of all, I think the building, and if correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like it's mostly made of wood. Is that correct? Can someone ask me that? Is that a wood building? I see Heidi nodding, right?
She's nodding her head, yes, yeah.
Yeah. Wood building in Prince Rupert where it rains 300 days a year. So I'll put that one out there. That's not going to work. That's just going to rot instantly. I'm a residential plumber. I would get asked to go to BC Housing all the time. Most of these buildings are almost condemnable because no one looks after them. And that leads me to my next question. Who's looking after these buildings? The city's not going to take on this effort. Who's looking after BC Housing buildings? Because half of these buildings start to rot, in Prince Rupert especially, because no one's looking after them. And this is at the end of my road. So I do have a say. I don't want a dissolving building at the end of my road. So another question. And I hope you guys have answers to these because I don't want to have another public hearing in a month. The traffic study was almost ridiculous. Okay, we live on Edward Avenue. We drive 11th Avenue every day. And I never once saw some sort of traffic study. The only time I saw somebody out there was on a February of last year in a snowstorm. So how are you going to get a proper traffic assessment in a snowstorm in February in Prince Rupert? Not going to happen. Okay, so my point, I can just keep bringing up these points all day long. It makes no difference. The point is, no one seems to have real answers to these questions. Okay, I am all for housing in Prince Rupert. We need lots of it, more than one building. But why put it in such a ridiculous area? Why? In a swamp. It makes no sense. Okay, I share this sentiment with a lot of people. You guys say you talk to the community. Well, yeah, just like the Daniele said there. Well, you didn't talk to our community, the community that's actually representing this area. Nobody wants this. Nobody wants this building. It's not to say we don't want housing. We don't want the building at the end of our road that's just going to create a traffic nightmare. And it's a BC Housing unit that no one knows who's going to take care of it. We don't have answers to that. I'm a residential plumber. I've been in BC Housing all over BC. These buildings are not taken care of. Unfortunately, it's a very unfortunate situation. But it's not my situation. And we're the ones paying the taxes on this thing. So who's going to take care of that? I would also like to know the transparency on this. There's got to be other city land that's available, but it's nowhere to be found. Where can I go and find city land that could be used for this project. And again, I'm for the project, just not the location. But where can we find this information on land? So, lots more questions. The last thing I would like to add is every time I was at the council meeting at the Civic Center there a month ago, and every time we ask questions like this, the council always have some body language like they don't want to hear it, and that drives me crazy because you guys are supposed to be partial to every question, and you guys have already seemed to make up your mind on this stuff, which drives everybody crazy. So I'm going to end it on that. Thank you for hearing me. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I see that Heidi and Mustafa have their hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm not sure. Do you want me to answer some of those or respond to some of the questions that were brought up?
I mean, as reasonably as you can. Yep.
So I'll get Glenn to answer the ones about the traffic study. Obviously, he is the traffic engineer with 25 years of experience with McElhaney, been based in the north for a very long time throughout the corridor from Prince George to Prince Rupert. So I'm going to get to him to talk about his methodologies that are obviously based on national standards for determining that the traffic bulges are a successful method of traffic calming. But in regards to the construction questions, we do have dimension drawings. I'm happy to share any dimensions with anybody. They're certainly not a secret. And both lot lines, specific property dimensions. I have had my personal phone number up on the website for months, and anybody is welcome to call me, as well as email me or anything that anyone feels comfortable in terms of connecting with me, in terms of questions about how the project works, construction standards. We have an envelope consultant who's one of the leading experts on envelope throughout BC. They've done most of the mitigation projects in the Lower Mainland. Their name is RDH, so you can look up their qualifications as well. I think you'll find that there are many, many, many wood projects that have lasted for generations in this province. So we're certainly not concerned about the durability of this project. We have metal cladding, we have big overhangs wherever we put wood. And like I said, the building science has come a long ways. I think BC Housing ensures now that our construction standards are some of the highest in the world. And wood has been proven time and time again to be the right building material for BC. So not worried about that part at all. We have some draft construction details. Again, we're happy to share those and how they work in terms of airflow and making sure that rot is not a problem. We use pressure treated wood where appropriate. Finally, question I think from both the previous speakers about home values. BC Housing has done extensive studies with real estate experts and municipalities throughout BC, so small towns all the way to sort of municipalities within the Lower Mainland on property values. And the research shows that actually property values don't decrease. They don't decrease with any more frequency than a property value would rise or decrease in any other neighborhood. So the science is there. We can certainly distribute that study. You can also find it online. So I'm going to quickly pass it off. Mustafa, do you want to go next, or do you want Glenn to talk about the traffic study?
Yeah, please, if I could. Hi, everyone. To three speakers. Vanessa, I apologize, I missed the second speaker, and third one was Cody, correct? Just want to address some of the questions that came about property taxes and the way that's operated and such. So a little bit of background, some context. The way this works is BC Housing provides capital for construction, okay? There's no capital to purchase land. So there is, Lackawanna's First Nation, Lackawanna's WAP Housing Society went to the city and said, look, there's an opportunity for us to apply for funding. We need land to be eligible. We need land to be eligible, and we're going to throw in some equity, and BC Housing will, provide the capital. Would you provide us parcels? Like I mentioned last public hearing, I named the 3 parcels of land. They were not suitable, or 2 parcels of land. They were not suitable. This one this one was our third and kind of final option. It seemed to be the most, I guess the best property available to us. So the way this works would be through a long-term lease. So we have to create sort of like a mortgageable interest in the land, and the only way you do that is through a long-term lease. So WAP Housing Society leases the land from Prince Rupert for a nominal fee for 60 years. We're just like, that creates a long-term ownership that BC Housing wants and that satisfies CMHC. And through that long-term lease, we can kind of leverage that and obtain the funding that we need. Okay, we're no different than any other property owner in the city. We're going to pay the full property taxes once that's determined and calculated and whatnot. We're going to follow all bylaws. We have an operating agreement for the 60 years for the life of the building with BC Housing, and that operating agreement is audited every year. Okay, so that looks at everything from the maintenance, the use of the building, and through to the end of its life. Okay, I think you were talking about some other BC Housing, developments in Prince Rupert. Yes, they are not in the best shape, but you're talking about 50, 60-year-old properties. Okay, they weren't built to 2019 BC building code. Okay, you're talking about stuff that was built in the 50s and the 60s, and they are rotting. And I'm sure you drive by them all the time and say, "Look at that! That's a BC Housing project. That's not what I want in my neighborhood." Well, unfortunately, that's not what we're building here. Okay, like Heidi and the team have said, we've got the best building envelope consulting firm probably in the country, RDH, who's designing this, the wall systems. We've got, people who've got years and years of experience designing this building. And with all that, I mean, we're going to be no different than any other operator. There's homes in your community, single family homes that are, I'm sure, probably within 11th Ave, there are some homes that need some TLC, right? We can't predict what's going to happen in 25 years time. I can tell you that it won't be due to the operations. There'll be, climate change, there'll be other issues. But what we're doing here is we are building quality. We're no different than any other property owner in the city. It'll be maintained. We'll have audits. We'll pay full property taxes. We'll collect rents. There'll be maintenance contracts to maintain the elevators, to clean the roof, to pressure wash, to salt. I mean, all that will be done to meet BC Housing standards. And I can tell you, BC Housing, we've been at this for 2 years designing this. BC Housing looks at every little thing that we do here. So I just want to leave it at that, and I'll pass it on to Glenn. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Mustafa. The study we completed, based on counts we did back in March, we delivered it back in May of this year. The speakers have mentioned that they didn't see any evidence that we were out there is actually really good news to us, because with the technology we use, we put up intersection cameras very discreetly so as to capture the actual patterns of the traffic without actually disclosing that we're there capturing traffic. Otherwise, there could be some folks that might want to affect the patterns that are on the street. So we do that deliberately to make sure that we don't get seen, and we capture what's actually happening. We followed a lot of the standard procedures and the new procedures to adjust the volumes based on regional changes from the COVID pandemic and the changes to the traffic patterns because of that. And for the most part, the study was very standard. There was nothing really earth-shattering about the extra 40 cars that are predicted, which is based out of the trip generation manual that is from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They're all very well accepted rates for what you would expect for 70 units. It's a very modest amount of traffic being added. And the traffic that we observed on the street was not that much either. So combining that together, we had a very strong level of service for the performance of that intersection even during the peak hours and even up to the 15-year horizon with projected growth. So most of the study was largely basic and following these standard procedures. One thing that made this a little different was that we were entering a situation where there was a lot of pre-existing concerns from the neighborhood about the existing situation of that intersection of 11th and Edward. We had the opportunity to hear from the residents directly and understand what was the main problems with the intersection. And they listed the traffic speeds, they listed the sight lines coming out of there, and concerns about the pedestrian safety in the area. It's rare that we can find one solution that can actually address all of the problems at the intersection, but in this particular case, we had that advantage. The use of these bulbs, the intersection curb extensions, has been used for decades, even in the northern BC here. They're based on Transportation Association of Canada guidelines from the Canadian Guide for Traffic Calming, and it's an accepted and proven way to slow traffic speeds. So you can get people to drive slower on 11th, which will improve safety in that respect. The unique situation on the west side of the intersection with the retaining wall, as that's improved as well, because as people coming out of Edward can't see around the retaining wall, with the putting of the curb extensions in, then that gives the vehicles a chance to move safely forward a little further to see around the retaining wall, as well as any parked cars, which are also pushed back further because of the design of the bulbs. And finally, the pedestrian safety in the area is improved because of the slower traffic speeds, as well as the reduced crossing distance for the crosswalks. So it's actually a very logical approach to resolving this. And I think you'll see a lot of improvements to the existing problems of the intersection with very little issue brought in from the development traffic itself, Your Worship.
Thank you. And before we proceed, so, people are asking questions. They may not like the answers to some of the questions, but these are the questions that are being answered. Is there new questions that people would like to pose? So what I'm not wanting this to turn into is a debate, because no one, if you don't agree with the project in the end, you're not going to agree with the project. But is there questions that, new questions that you feel that need to be addressed here? Ms. Miller, I see 2 hands up.
Yeah, Mr. Curry is unmuted.
Okay.
Well, first, going back to my original issues, is the communication between city and citizens here. After the first hearing, I was told, I think we were all told, that there would be something mailed to us, or at least delivered to us, regarding the questions that we had asked in the first hearing. And we would have some answers mailed to us, or at least a package that we could go over, and then have some information for the chat we're having now. My information didn't show up until Friday afternoon, this last Friday. And that's enough for me to digest between now and then. All right, now for me, I can digest it, blah, blah, blah. But maybe for other people in my neighborhood, they might not have even seen it yet. So the lack of communication between city and citizens, and between this project and everyone else, is just infuriating. It's absolutely insane. It just doesn't make any sense. You want to push this thing through. It's like you've already made your mind up. I've talked to a few people, and especially the proponents on this, when they say when the zoning gets pushed through, when it gets pushed through, you guys have already made up your mind. It's already happening. We all know what's happening. You think what I say is going to change this thing? No. This is a joke. You guys have already made up your mind because you've already displayed it with the English language that you speak. one thing I'd like to bring up was Glenn. Glenn with Mac, is he with McElhaney? Glenn with McElhaney? Is that right? Yes? No? Anybody?
What's the question?
My question is, can you please disclose the time and the personnel that you had on this traffic study? Again, I live here. Nobody ever saw a traffic study. It never happened. So how do you, I would love to see the time, the day.
Sakura, he already answered that question.
No, you didn't, because none of this has been disclosed. None of this has been disclosed. None of it. Time and days and personnel. I haven't seen a thing. You can unmute me. It's okay.
Vanessa's next.
All right, Vanessa, you've been unmuted.
Oh, yay. I just have a question in regards to the parking stalls. It was stated that there was 63 parking stalls with the unit being built. So now, is that including guest parking, or is there additional stalls for parking? That was one of my questions. And then honestly, I have to sort of back up my neighbor, Cody. It's really just been disappointing with council, honestly, like, and you know, I find that it's really unfortunate because, you know, we are the ones that voted you in there to represent us. And I know my husband has spoken with a couple of the councillors and stuff in regards to it. And, you know, like the general sort of consensus with all of us, and I know other people, has been the lack of information. I agree with Cody in saying that, you know, it kept, you know, any sort of language going around it. I was even on the earlier proponents information session, and Chris Knight said, when it's the zoning's rezoned and stuff. And I'm like, how can you even say that when you don't know? So I guess what I'm saying is it's very disappointing as a taxpayer and as a person who's voted for all of you people that you aren't there representing my interest and the community's interest at large. You know, I personally feel that, yes, absolutely, we need more housing. Am I a butthurt about it being there? Not really. Now I've sort of had a chance to kind of absorb it and digest it and stuff. You know, do I feel like it should only be for Lac-Ouellette members? No, I think it should be, if you want to do what's in the best interest of the community as a whole, it should be open to whoever qualifies. It shouldn't be just for one specific band. It should be open to everybody. And, you know, I just feel like, you know, I'm really disappointed with council. Like I said, the only one who actually came in here and asked questions, drove, and seen where we were having issues with coming in and out of here was Barry. So, you know, I implore all of you, before you make your decision, please be open-minded and come in here and, you know, see what we will be dealing with. I don't know if the bump outs are going to work. Glenn insists that they are. I don't know. I would like to see, if they do put the bump outs, that you at least have on the left side, where I think it's the north way, at least have no parking there. Because if you're having pedestrians coming across and, you know, traffic when you go that way, because you need to see up that street, people are coming down pretty fast. You know, if you're using the street for overflow parking for this complex, there's going to be accidents. People are going to get hurt. So at least now it's all on record.
Thank you. And before I pass it off to Mustafa and Heidi, I'll just bring some clarity again about the city's role. The city is regulated by the Development Procedure Bylaw and the Local Government Act. Ultimately, it's not our job to communicate projects to the community. That's the proponent's role. They are guided through a 4-reading process. All of that process is regulated by the Local Government Act. The City Council is legally obligated to keep an open mind until after a public hearing. And it's not our job to make sure that the questions are being answered. It's our job to facilitate, as land use regulators, any rezoning that's going to happen in the community. Ultimately, it's the proponent making a proposal. Any proponent can make any proposal. Our job is to make sure that your voices are being heard, which is exactly what is happening today. So any implication that we're not listening, I mean, this is the second public hearing for the community. So that's the first time we've ever done that. And that's because we want to make sure that it's absolutely clear for everybody in this process what the technical details are. That's why we have professionals here from the proponent answering further questions, doing further due diligence. It's nothing surprising to me to see changes being made to a proposal, because that is exactly the whole point of development, is to engage the community and make changes based on feedback. The proponent did an open house before this meeting, before the other meeting. They've had Zoom meetings. Those notifications are part of the proponent's package. That's what they're supposed to be doing, and that's what they're doing. And here we are now listening to the community twice. Public hearing is usually where all of the feedback gets collected for council to make a decision after the public hearing. That's just how the process works. And I can understand people feel it's frustrated, like it's our job to be going out and engaging, but that is actually not our job. In fact, we're supposed to be more impartial so that we can collect information from all viewpoints and all opinions so that we can make informed choices based on not just legal obligations, but community perspectives as well. So there is no done deal, so to speak, on any respect. This is why we're hearing you right now. And I'm taking notes and hearing your concerns, and I've heard answers to questions tonight. And then after this meeting, council will then have a fulsome discussion about their actual views based on the discussions we have. That's just how it works. One of the changes we've made that this process didn't get into, that all our new processes will be, is that we front-loaded public engagement in all future developments. This one was backloaded to a public hearing in future developments, so it'll be nothing but public engagement in the front, but that was passed in January, a new development process, because of these types of issues of communication and things like that. But unfortunately, this one was started before that new development process was completed. So I just want to make sure it's clear to everybody here on the phone and on the Zoom that that is our job. We are actually listening to you right here, right now. And that is our job, to hear that. And then we will make a decision after this public hearing. So I'll pass it over to Mustafa and Heidi. You guys had some extra things you wanted to say.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to answer I think the question directed to us was about the parking stalls. So 63 parking stalls is what is required by the municipal bylaws. So that is for the 70 units, 60 units each have one stall, and then the elders units, which are on covenant as being only available for elders to rent, have a lower parking count required. So that's why the 3 stalls for the remaining 10 units makes the 63 stalls, and visitor parking is on the street. And part of McElhaney's report was to look at the parking. So that is part of what they studied. And Mustafa, I'll pass it over to you to answer the part about the engagement process.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks, Cody. Thanks, Vanessa. I appreciate your you speaking, and we want to maintain this respectful dialogue and continue this discussion. But we need to clarify. Council said, okay, proponent, you need to notify residents within a 200-meter radius. I believe it was double the what's normally required. So I believe it's 200 meters. We went out to the local print shop in Prince Rupert, had them print pamphlets, and we went to Canada Post. And it was sorted out. We got the mailing addresses, the confidential information addresses, and they were mailed up. Okay, so if you did not receive it, we apologize. We followed the process. We went to the print shop. We went to Canada Post. They were mailed out. I believe the only development didn't receive it was on Prince Rupert Avenue, I think, or Boulevard. There's an apartment building, and like I said last time, the building manager did not want to pass out the pamphlet because he had some issue with the city, which I'm not sure what that issue was, but he was not willing to provide the information to the residents of that complex. Shortly after, there was a website that went live, and as required through this development process, it was up there for 2 weeks at a minimum. I think maybe a little bit longer. There was an email address, feedback that Heidi and myself and members of the team would answer. There's also some people, that had left voicemails, and those voicemails were forwarded to us from the city. I can tell you, we reached out. We reached out to all those that emailed and answered questions, and we had that I believe in April was when we did that kind of that virtual, that Zoom sort of open house and presentation. And I mean, since then, there have been plenty of opportunity for people to send us questions, whether it's through the city, through the email. There's been articles written about this project. There's been plenty. We feel we've done our best and we've done our part. So there's been no shortcuts whatsoever. Vanessa, your question about the funding, again, I have to clarify. In 2018, there were some funding calls out. One of them was called Indigenous Housing Fund, and this is the one that Lac Lam's applied to because they're eligible to apply to, and funding is for First Nations, Métis Nations of BC, nonprofit and for-profit developers who want to partner with Indigenous housing providers and First Nations. Okay. Yes, Lac Lam's band members will have priority. But once we fill the need of the Lac Lam's members, we will open it up to other First Nations community members, other Métis, whether you're Métis, First Nations, and people in the community. And again, once we met that need, we will open it up to non-First Nations. I can tell you right now, 70 units, like there will be a wait list. Okay, we're doing our best to just please keep in mind that this funding has some, for us, there's agreements that were in place with BC Housing, and BC Housing is funding housing for Indigenous peoples. Okay, we would love to build more housing. We're all very passionate about housing, but the needs right now and the funding is tied to Lac Lam's WAP Housing Society, and the society is building it for the band members living in Prince Rupert. Okay, there are other funding calls out there for non-Indigenous and Indigenous groups that anybody can apply to. And I encourage others, and I'm sure there's others that want to build more affordable housing. I encourage you to look and seek those, discussion with BC Housing and government agencies to do so, okay? I think I've answered all the other questions. Let's please maintain the respectful dialogue, and thanks.
Thank you. So are there new questions or new concerns that haven't been addressed yet? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm still very confused here. So the city had this approach in place by January, but it didn't reach public hearing till August. This is very confusing. I just don't understand it. Like this seems like you're just pushing this through for no reason other than to, I don't know, gain constituents. I really don't get it. Please answer that question, please. I'm done.
I'm not sure what the question is.
Am I still on? What?
I'm saying in January, we passed a new development procedure bylaw, which has nothing to do with this project. This project began last year in terms of its process beginning.
But the bylaw is still in play for this project. Like
No.
this project still falls under these bylaws.
I'm not here to have a debate with you, Mr. Curry. That's just, this project is regulated by the old development variance permit or the old development procedure bylaw. And that's what the process has been. If this was to be rammed through, this would have been done in 2 months. And it's been over a year since this project began in terms of its actual reading and its public process. So this project has actually taken quite a considerable amount of time and has gone through a variety of due diligence. So that's just where it's at. Do you have any other new questions that you feel are not addressed?
Nothing that I feel is going to be answered tonight, so thank you. Ridiculous.
Next question. I think that's you, Mr. Daniele.
Mr. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Council. I just appreciate the chance to speak, guys. So thank you very much. I know it's after 7. Thank you. In digesting everything that's been said tonight, I believe it's Mustafa's point, the mailing of the information, and I'm not sure exactly what that was. Again, as a property owner and my brother being right beside, we haven't received anything other than a leaflet or pamphlet or whatever you want to call it that was the same as everyone else in the municipality, as far as I know. So to me, again, that 200 meters is, we're not saying the same thing when we're talking about it. And the 200 meters, again, you know, as, you know, my wife and I going through the process of a variance application, we did it twice actually. It was to canvass the neighborhood, so affected citizens, if you will, or neighborhood people, whether or not they were in favor of it. And that's not what the 200 meters to me was supposed to be. It was, hey, what does everybody think? Not like, here it is, here's the information, you know, type thing. So it's two different things we're talking about, I think. With regard to Heidi and Heidi Nesbitt, sorry, when she was talking about a study that was done, you know, and there was no property value loss, you know, I question that, and not because I have any education to back up the questioning, but I don't know one person that's like, oh, you know, I want to live next to a great big complex. Hey, can I buy a house that's next to a hotel or apartment building in this case? You know, I don't see how that's reasonable or realistic, if you will. So I'm not here to argue whether or not that was a study, but from my perspective, and like I said, you know, from the perspective of, you know, my concern of resale, I can't digest that one, if you will. I can't palate it. So, and nothing, you know, I'm absolutely respectful to everybody. I'm sure there's people with a lot more education than me on these subjects speaking, but like rationally, I can't, it just doesn't equate for me. So anyways, those are my last 2 points just in what's been said tonight. Oh boy, my wife wants to talk. Now you're in trouble. I'll leave it at that, guys. Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you very much.
I do have just a quick question. It is obviously in regards to traffic. If this variance goes through with the amount of traffic, etc., is the city willing to take on liability for the accidents or any of that may occur or will occur there? Like for future tenants, the already surrounding neighborhood, everybody involved in this, are you willing to take on possibly being sued if something were to happen to somebody there? Knowing what we already know now with the issues that it already holds there. That's it.
Thank you. We'll take that under advisement.
Thanks.
Is there any other comments? Mustafa?
Yeah. Thank you. So the notification period. So with the mail out, if I heard that correctly, you did receive the mail out, and in that document, there's a link to the website, and that's what, you know, was asked of us as the proponent, was to notify neighbors within a 200 meter radius of the project for as part of the rezoning application, to notify you, provide you with information. There is a link, and in that link we posted some information on the same information that's been presented to you today, but in a kind of a high level package, and along with the traffic study, and that we put out later. And if you went on there, you could see exactly what we were building and what we were doing, and then you could provide us some feedback. And we may have received feedback from you, may have not, but that's what was asked of us. And this process is pretty standard across, you know, most of BC. I don't know any municipality that does it differently. So that's what we were asked to do, and we made sure we did it in this way. Maybe Heidi has some comments as well, but that's it.
Thank you. I think Vanessa has a question.
Go ahead, Vanessa, you're unmuted.
It's just maybe more of a comment. in regards to what Cody and Mr. Daniele had said in regards to the information with this. I know myself and my neighbors, well, for myself, on, I believe it was September 29th, I did request, I've seen that there was this meeting tonight, and I did make the request for the Zoom link and stuff. And I had to I was told I would get it, and I actually had to follow up today to get it. So, I think the communication hasn't been very good. And I'm not blaming anybody in particular, but I don't know if it's just that the proponent didn't know who to give it to or what, so I think that sort of leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth too. It's nothing. I mean, we just really feel like nothing's been really upfront about it and stuff, which is really unfortunate. So, and I know even the other meetings that have happened prior, in order to get the information, you really have to hunt for it. And you really have to be, wanting to be involved in it and stuff. And, when you have a busy life and stuff and you're raising kids and stuff, I mean, that's sort of a little unfair, I think, because, it really does impact a lot of people. So I think for just projects going forward, it should be a little more organized and a little more transparent and, so, and then people don't think that you're hiding something.
Heidi, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just follow up on Mustafa's point in the mailouts. The only mailout that went out was the leaflet. So nobody missed anything. If you received the leaflet, that's all that went out. And it did direct you to a website. On that website were our architectural drawings, as well as renderings, and a brief description of the project. There was also my personal cell phone number, as I already said, and my email address. So I responded to probably 50 individual emails, and again, inviting people to call me at any time to talk about the project. So I really feel like we did go above and beyond. I had only 2 conversations with citizens, but that was always publicly available. My personal cell phone number that you could have called at any time of day. So I think that we really did our best. And as Mustafa said in the Q&A and Glenn as well, none of us are in it to make money. I mean, of course, it's our job, but we're not big, mean developers. We're trying to make social housing projects and do the best job we can. And we are very educated in our fields. We've been in the industry, Glenn, Chris, myself, for over 20 years each. Working in various parts of architecture and engineering, built lots of different projects, and we're here because we love it and because we really care about communities and about providing housing. So I hope that everybody takes that to heart, that nobody that's involved with the project is trying to pull anything over. The information has always been there, and sometimes for sure it's hard to find that information. For that, I apologize. I get it. There's little nuances all the time. In terms of this meeting in particular, the Zoom link was set up by the city because it is a public hearing that is hosted by the city. And so it was on the city's website. I think, whether that's tricky to find or not is probably up for some debate. But like the mayor said, we're not really here to debate. So thank you again for lots of great comments and questions tonight.
Mr. Curry.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, well, you just, as Mayor just stated when I was on with him a second ago, this thing has been in the works for 2 years. Then why was it that the community that's affected by all of this was only contacted within the last year? Crazy.
The project's been publicly available for a year since the first reading of the project. Yeah, that's when the project begins.
I don't go on the city website for entertainment. All right. There was a billboard put at the top of our road that told us what was happening in February. That was it. That's the first time we've all heard about it. You think we're just paying? Yeah, it's ridiculous. Totally stupid. I know it's going through anyways, but you guys have done a horrible job at.
Okay, Mr. Cody, that's enough. Then. Thanks.
Communication.
Okay. Other comments, please. Go ahead, Paul.
Paul, you need to unmute your mic. Mr.
Yeah.
Legate, you need to unmute your mic.
He's got it
Yes.
now.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to comment. I actually wasn't sure I was going to be able to make the meeting tonight. I had a client come in my office at the Housing Advocacy Office, Prince Rupert Unemployed Action Center. They asked about the meeting. I said, well, let me check. And I just typed in City of Prince Rupert, council agenda, and boom, it was right there. The link was there. And I found it for my client about 30 seconds. And I had no idea where to look. So I didn't have it previously. I just point that out. It was really accessible, and I'm a bit of a Luddite, so good work with that. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other outstanding questions from the members of the community regarding this project? Okay, I'll call a second time if there's any other speakers that would like to speak to this project. Okay, I see a hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. Again, I really appreciate the time tonight. The fact that you guys pushed this past 7 o'clock, meaning you guys, I realize, people are sitting in the hot seat. Whether or not whatever happens here, my wife and I appreciate everyone's effort on this. And with that, I'll just say thank you very much.
Thank you. We would go till 11 o'clock to make sure everyone gets heard. Are there other questions for tonight? And I'll call a second time for any other questions for this evening. Okay, I will call for a third and final time for any further questions. Okay, seeing none, we're going to adjourn tonight's public hearing. Council will go into our regular meeting after this, where we will discuss a third reading of this project. After this public hearing is adjourned, council is legally will not be able to communicate to residents of this community or be able to collect any new information until this project is completed now. So council will be not available to community members now that the public hearing is adjourned. That's regulated under the Local Government Act through the province of BC. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn this public hearing this evening. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Randhawa. Anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much for everyone for showing up and expressing your views. And we're going to go into our regular council meeting now. Are we staying on here, Rosa?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
We'll just give everyone a moment to log off, and then we'll just stay on this one.
Okay.
All right, that's everybody.
I'll call tonight's regular council to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of October 4th, 2021 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Scott Morvan, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting of September 20th, 2021 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Adie, seconded by Councillor Niche. Anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of September 20, 2021 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Niche. Thank you.
You can unmute yourself.
Oh, it muted me by accident for some reason.
Oh, lucky.
Okay, and item 3C, recommendation that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of September 20th, 2021 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Scott Morvan, seconded by Councillor Niche. Anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, first up, Mr. Buchan, we have a report for DVP 2109 for 198 Prince Rupert Boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On June 21st, the city received an application for a development variance permit for the property located at 198 Prince Rupert Boulevard. This application was received to permit a carport that was already under construction. The application is for a variance to the city's zoning bylaw, section 520 sub B, for proposed side property line setback to 0 meters. The current side yard setback for an R2 zone is 1.2 meters. The required notifications have been sent out by council policy, and the application is here for council's consideration now for decision.
Thank you. So recommendation that council approve DVP 2109 for 198 Prince Rupert Boulevard. Moved by Councillor Randhawa, seconded by Councillor Scott Morvan. Discussion? Councillor Niche.
I'm going to start by saying that I am opposed to this, and not so much that I'm opposed with somebody wanting to build what they want to build, but I'm opposed with the way that this was done. You know, if you allow things to basically be built on a weekend and then applied for a variance because they got caught building it, if we allow that, then that will continue to happen. And I think that, you know, the thing that frustrates me the most about this project is that this person has done this before, and we've already had previous when they built their addition on the side of the house. And it frustrates me as a builder who, when I build things, I apply for permits. And when I apply for permits, I go through process, and I go through getting inspections done, and I go through that all the time. And for me to see somebody slaps up something up on a weekend and then get caught and then ask for permission to build it after it's already built, to me, that is not how it should be done, and we should be stopping this right away. And they can remove the structure, and they can go through the process properly and build the structure the way it's required by the BC Building Code and get the variance for it first. And that's my feelings on it.
Councillor Scott Morvan.
I want to add, if that's the case for this particular file, I did not catch that in the document. If that is the case, I would like to see a proper process in the future. And and like I said, if this is the case, I will rescind my second on that motion.
Before we do that, my question would be for Mr. Buchan. Do we know if this thing was built to code, or any way to know?
Mr. Mayor, I can't tell you that it was built to code, but I can tell you that it won't be. It won't receive a building department approval unless it is built to code. So if there are any deficiencies to the current construction, that would have to be rectified before there's an occupancy given on it.
Okay. Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, I don't like the way this was handled either, but if we're going to approve this, then I would like to see a covenant put on this that it can only be used as a carport. It cannot be used as a deck. It you can't have access to it from the house. It's strictly a carport, nothing else. because this person has a tendency to build something and then add on to his house from it. There can't be any railings put up on this or anything else. I would like to see a covenant with some recourse if he does anything else, that he gets fined and fined heavily for it.
Other comments? Go ahead, Ms. Miller, then Nick after that.
Just to advise, I did receive a statement from a resident. So in accordance with the policy, the notification was mailed out to a 50-meter radius surrounding the property. And I did receive a comment in the negative from a Ms. Hanson on Prince Edward Boulevard, who has stated quite emphatically that they are against this development permit for many of the reasons stated here this evening.
Other comments? Nick, Mr. 80.
Councillor 80 to you, I think.
Councillor 80. Love it.
It's all right. We'll go back to first names in a couple of hours.
It's getting late already. My mind.
I just wanted, I don't really have anything to add other than to concur with what Councillor Nish has said. I think that it's a really slippery slope if you start allowing things to happen after the fact, when, you know, literally hundreds and hundreds of residents have gone through the process, and sometimes have met with decisions that they didn't like. I think, to be fair to my experience on council, most of the time, when people come to us with requests to build a deck or make improvements to their home, most of the time I don't see it as my obligation to get in their way as property owners. But I do think that in deference to all of those who have followed the proper process, we need to insist on it in this case.
Mr. Buchan.
Thank you, Your Worship. If council elects to not approve this, then this suggestion won't be of any use. But if council does decide to go ahead with approving it and wants to have a condition that has been suggested, I can offer some wording for that. And basically it'd be to amend the draft development variance permit to include a requirement for a restrictive covenant that would prohibit enclosure of the carport, prohibit the erection of rails or stairs to the rooftop or doors to the rooftop. And I would suggest also, prohibiting any storage or use of the rooftop as a deck, if council elects to proceed with this.
What's council's view based on the suggestion? Councilor Nish?
I still believe it should be so I've had a discussion with the building inspector about what's allowed and what's not allowed. And so the one thing that, in this situation, and I'm telling this as a builder's perspective, whenever you put a post up to support something on a house, that needs to go to rock in this town. Now, in this situation, there's a concrete driveway and a planter, and it's been attached to that. So unless they can verify what it was attached to underneath, then it could fail. So when Mr. Buchan made the statement that it would have to BC Building Code would have to be met in order for it to be approved. Now, when something is not attached to the house, such as a carport, it's the same requirement is not required. So they could technically build a carport not attached to the house, and they wouldn't necessarily have to have those supports. But in this situation, it's essentially attached to the house because it's up to the house. So I still believe that this is the wrong approach to. If that's the way it's going to be, then on every weekend people are going to be building stuff, and and then saying, "Oh, what? I wasn't allowed to do that? Oh, sorry." And then apply for a variance permit. And I don't feel that that's the right approach. And you know, maybe after, if he removes this and he applies for a variance permit and actually draws up a plan like I do every time I apply for a permit, draws up a plan with the proper requirements and says exactly what he's doing, just like I do every day for my job, then that's the only way I can accept it. And I don't feel that we should be going down this road. Otherwise we're going to have weekend warriors all the time building stuff because they think they can just build it. And if that's what we want, then you know, we could move forward on this. But that's not what I want to see. I want to see things done. I'm one to see things built properly. It really bothers me when things are poorly built because I see what has to get done to fix it properly. And I'm the one that's fixing the mistakes of the past now. And there'll be people in the future that'll be fixing mistakes of current day people's mistakes. So I still am opposed to this.
You want to make a motion to amend the approval? Councillor Niche?
No, I don't want to make an amendment. I want to just deny the whole thing myself. So that's where I'm going with it. If somebody else wants to make that amendment, they can feel free
Well,
to do that.
I'm saying the amendment would be to deny, not approve the motion.
Oh, to deny it. Yeah, sure.
Yes.
I will make the motion for sure.
Okay. Seconder? Seconded by Councillor Skelton Morvan. Any discussion on the amendment to deny the approval for the DBP 2109? Councillor Ranawa?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, like the owner of the home, like even he mentioned, right, like it's rainy city and he need carport to fix his car, to park his car. But I agree with the Councillor Niche, like it should be done the proper way. And it should be like, he should apply like other people do. And I agree with that.
Okay. Is there anybody opposed to the amendment to the motion? Okay, seeing no one's opposed, the motion has been amended to not approve it. Is there any further discussion about the motion on the floor, which is not to approve the DVP 2109? Okay. All those in favor of it not being approved? Okay, anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Sounds like we'll have to have a discussion with this individual in particular, since this is not the first time that this has occurred. Thank you, Mr. Buchan. Next, we have a report from our corporate administrator regarding a request for support, Prince Rupert Amateur Swim Club. So the recommendation that council directs staff to provide a letter of support to the Prince Rupert Amateur Swim Club's application to the BC's COVID recovery grant. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Ranawa. Any discussion? Okay, is there anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, next, our topic for the evening, the report from iPlan regarding the City of Prince Rupert zoning bylaw number 3462 2021, amendment bylaw number 3475 2021. The recommendation is council give third reading to the City of Prince Rupert zoning bylaw number 3475 2021 to allow a 22.5 meter high building providing 70 apartments on the subject property. Any movers and seconders? Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Adie. Okay, is there discussion tonight? Is there going to be an order, a list of folks who want to speak? Okay, we'll start with Councillor Niche.
Well, this has obviously been an interesting conversation tonight. We have some strong opinions on what people feel about this project. I'm going to start by saying that this hasn't been a project that's just been pushed through. I'm offended by that statement because you have to start somewhere, and starting somewhere is saying, hey, we have this land available and this land available and this land available. You have to start by looking at the project and saying, and this is from the proponent's perspective, looking at it and saying, is it possible to build here? What can we do? And so, for us the process is set in place. It's the same in every town. It's the same, requirements by the provincial government. This is when we hear from the people, from the public hearings. It's not a matter of us wanting to block people out and not listen. And we've made up our minds already. And that bothers me that people think that way, because this has been a long process. And I will say that the proponent actually, Lac Lams in the beginning kind of came out a little strong, saying that, oh, the shovels are going to be in the ground. Well, they hadn't even started the rezoning process. And so for them to make that statement was pretty, it shouldn't have been made right away. But, they're not developers, so they don't understand the process, and now we've worked through it. So back to the project. Obviously we've had a lot of time to think about this one, and then conversations with a lot of people. And I've got this map, which is an original 1909 map from Prince Rupert, and on that map it shows many streets, and for the most part the town has been built with those streets in mind. There's been a few times where because of the lie of the land, they've had to kind of reroute or maybe make a road a dead end. And if you look at that area, I believe there's the original drawing shows the street that goes Albert Avenue, continues all the way through, and there's approximately 50 or 60 building lots in that area. So if you look at the lie of the land, to build that road, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So, this argument has come forward about, well, it's a swamp. Well, this whole island's a swamp. To build on this land, including Edward Avenue itself, and I'll use that as an example, when Edward Avenue went in there, that was supposed to be 16 houses built by a developer. The developer went in and logged the property and hauled out 1,000 dump truck loads of muskeg, and then spent 7 months chipping rock out of there in order to make 16 houses go in there. So there is no doubt that this chunk of land is a challenging place to build, but this whole island is a challenging place to build. So that argument to me it's really not effective, because I just find that the whole island is a challenging place to build. So if anything, you densify in order to make it financially possible. So that's on that perspective. People's conversations about driving and the road and speeders, and that conversation could go on about any street in this town. I had this conversation, I recall, for years ago, someone talking about speeding up Graham all the time and wanting crosswalks. And I said, well, are you supposed to put a crosswalk in every corner? I mean, you put crosswalks where they're necessary or where they're required. I personally feel that the bulges or the bulbs of the sidewalk is an effective way of slowing traffic down. And I'll use an example. If you go to Smithers, if you drive down and if you drive 3rd Avenue in our town, you will see people speed up and down 3rd Avenue. If you drive down Main Street in Smithers, where they have the bulbs out on all the corners, the traffic is super slow on their Main Street. And it encourages people to slow down, because they're having to pay attention more to see what's going on. When you have big, wide open roads, they're going to speed. They're going to go faster. They're going to drive more aggressively. And 11th Avenue, there is no doubt, has people that drive fast on that road. I feel the bulges in the road will slow them down. And in fact, it could be encouraged that maybe that's something we can do more of on that street to slow people down, because I do feel that it works. It works in Smithers, and I see it working there. And then another topic that was brought up is maintenance. Well, this is a challenging town for maintenance. There is no doubt about that. Mildew grows on everything. So can we say that they're not going to maintain it? We don't know that. 25 years down the road, what is it going to look like? We don't know. But you can say that about anyone's house, anyone's apartment building, any building in this town, you can say that about. So we can only hope that they have a standard that they keep to. But as far as not approving a project because someone might not maintain it, that to me is, I wouldn't tell someone they can't build a house because they might not wash the siding in 10 years. So I just can't use that as a reason to deny it. And parking in this situation, if you do take into factor any other BC housing projects, there's very few of them, or really none of them, where the parking is used to max capacity. So I would think that if this follows suit to that, there should be plenty of parking on site, and I would think that some of the guests could park on site, because I don't think the parking lot will be full. I could be wrong on that one, and only time will tell. But if I look at other BC housing projects, that's what I see. I see lots of empty parking lots. I don't see a lot of houses, or a lot of units with cars parked in front of them. There is some, but not max capacity. So that's just my points. I am supportive of housing in this town. I mean, we're in a time where there's all sorts of housing needed, and every little bit helps. I would hope that more people come forward and apply for grants through BC Housing to build other projects. And yeah, that's about all I have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Adey.
Thank you. Councillor Nish has gone over some of the specific points that I think need to be addressed in terms of the opinions that have been expressed in public meetings. So I won't necessarily revisit the points that Councillor Nish has made, but I do want to say that in the, I guess, 3 years now that I've been on council, we make dozens of decisions. Some of them are pretty straightforward. Some of them involve navigating differences of opinion. And in those cases, 90% of the time you can find compromises and people generally walk away happy. I guess this would be the first major decision where I don't think that's the case. I think in this case, regardless of what we decide to do tonight, there's going to be some people that are unhappy about it. I wish that wasn't the case, but I think that's the reality. So given that we have a diversity of opinions that maybe aren't going to meet in a happy middle ground, we have to make a choice. So what I'm hearing is a lot of concerns were expressed, particularly at the first public hearing, related to things that the city could actually address, related to things that the proponent could actually address well within the parameters of their project. And I see a great deal has a great deal of movement there. So I think to say that the people who have concerns haven't been heard is really negated by the presence of responses to their concerns in the proposal as it now stands. So we heard a lot about traffic. I see the engineers' responses to that. I do want to add to that concern, though, the experience of trying to navigate a couple of the intersections down 11th Avenue, particularly at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and at 8:30 in the morning when the schools are letting out, there is a high density of traffic there. And I think that to suggest that the only place that we need to be aware of the potential for changing or addressing traffic problems is just the corner of Edward and 11th, I think that's probably not true. I think that the reality is that there is a traffic flow there that I think we need to spend some time having a look at and seeing what we can do to make it work a little better. Whether that's Edward Avenue and 11th or where Prince Rupert Boulevard meets 11th Avenue, or when it all kind of lets out on Highway 16. I think they're all areas that we need to address. But I do want to credit the proponents with their responsiveness to the concerns that were expressed, even if they fall short of making everybody happy. So I think in the end, the dynamic has been that the concerns and the opposition has come from people in that neighborhood. That is not exclusively true, but I think that's generally true. And I think that the expressions of support have come from a broader community base. And to be fair to both sides, there has been no shortage of expressions on either side. And as council, we're left with trying to address an issue which I think of all of the issues we hear about, somewhere in the top 5, the housing shortage is one of them. And so here we have a project in a particular place. It's got to be somewhere. It's going to be in a place. I don't think it's the only time we're going to have this conversation. If we are, in fact, headed down a path of easing the pressure on housing, which will have the effect of making sure that people have places to live, it will probably also have the effect of rationalizing the amount that people have to pay for the places they live. It's not all going to be solved by this development. It's going to take more. And what that means is that other neighborhoods are likely to face some of the same questions as development projects arise to help address this problem. So that might be a fairly long-winded way of saying that I recognize and appreciate the passion that people have expressed ideas on both sides. I value the points that have been made. I think that there's been some progress towards resolving some of those issues. I'm not sure that we're all the way there yet. But as a general position, I have to say that the most important issue here that we need to try and solve is to ease the pressure on housing. And this project is one step towards doing that. And that's why I'm inclined to support it.
Thank you. Other councillors? Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, first of all, I want to agree with Councillor Neese that I find it rather insulting that our body language and our minds were made up by body language or other things. I don't think we would have had a second hearing if our minds were made up. I wouldn't have wasted time going over into that area to look at it personally, and I know Councillor Neese did the same thing and walked in there and that. We don't do that if our minds are made up. Our minds are made up, we just walk away from it. As far as the project, yeah, it's rather large. I think it's going to be parking and traffic is going to be problematic. I think visitor parking on the street is going to be very problematic. And, it's going to have to be solved one way or the other. And possibly after the project's built, it might have to be solved with no parking or something like that. So more parking. We're going to have to look at the parking aspect of it. As far as decreasing in taxes and property value, I don't think that really applies here. I've looked at studies done and I didn't see it happen. if you talk to people on Sloan and McKay that have lived across from BC Housing for 30, 40 years, the houses that have been maintained and looked after have appreciated like any other house in Prince Rupert. The houses that weren't depreciated. Comparing this project to BC Housing in other parts of the city, I think is a poor comparison because, as it was pointed out, they were built 50, 60 years ago to poorer standards. Concerns about the parking lot, old cars, unlicensed cars, other concerns, that'll be something the management of the apartment's going to have to look after. And if it's not looked after, then I expect the city to do something about it. It'll be a rental agreement thing. You know, like it's like any other rental property. There will be rules there and they'll have to be followed. And hopefully they will be. And if they're not, they'll be adhered to. I think on the north side of 11th, turning left out of Edwards is definitely a problem. The bump out's going to help it. But I'd like to see, as Vanessa, I believe it was, suggested, no parking there. Because I know myself, I drive a big truck. If I park that even 15 feet from a corner, you can't see past it sometimes. You're going to pull out. That could be a problem. I know there's going to be lots of kids there. I'm hoping the play area behind the building and other areas are going to accommodate that. But I think overall, I would love to see the entrance moved farther south down 11th away from, so you don't have both Edwards and the entrance coming into the same way. I don't think it can physically or feasibly be done, but that's something maybe Mr. Buchan can talk to the proponent about and see if they can look at that. I think the only downside of this is really the traffic and possibly parking, which is hand in hand with the traffic. But like Councillor Adey says, traffic in this town is problematic just about everywhere. You go up on Fulton, you go on Borden, all over the place. It's the same thing. The main concern is we need housing. And I don't think a project this size, no matter where you put it, there's going to be pushback. Unfortunately, again, some people are going to be happy, some people are going to be unhappy. But overall, I think it's something we've got to look at. And I really think if there's going to be problems down the road, it's going to be with the tenants and rental agreements. And that's something that can be addressed. You know, that happens in any complex. You know, like everyone has trouble with their neighbors, no matter where they live. And so that's something that, you know, will have to be addressed when it happens. But other than that, I think the housing itself is something we need.
Thank you. Further comments? Councillor Randhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of the concern already raised by other councillors. And the traffic is the main concern. I can say that, like I see every day, especially from Edward Avenue, Brett, Alexander to take left turns. It's always been challenging. So like, and I see people speeding there. That's the big issue there. So like in our town, speed limit is 50 unless posted, but school zone, playground zone 30. But on our one, we have exception on Atlin Avenue from 1900 block to 1500 block. There's a speed limit is 30. So I can suggest like if city can do like from Alfred Street to Brett Place, we can change speed limit to 30, like same like we have on Eldon Avenue. I think that can solve our problem for the traffic speed. But on the other side, like developer already mentioned, like these houses are for First Nations, but they were thinking about renting to other First Nations and then to other community. I think that's a good idea for them. But the housing is an issue, and I think except from trafficking problem, this will solve our housing problem, like 70 extra units to our community, and that will help for housing. So I'll be in favor of this. project. But I strongly recommend to city, like we should be looking for slowing down the traffic from Belford Street to Brett Place to bring 30 like we have on Eldon Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, Councillor Morrow?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think it's fair to say, based on everything we've heard, not just tonight, but also the last public hearing and everything the last few months, is that the housing debate surrounding this rezoning application, I think, is actually larger than the project itself. And I mean, at a bare minimum, I think what everyone can agree on is that, our city, we need more housing, we need lots of it, and we need it quickly. I don't think anyone has disputed that basic fundamental fact. But our job is to analyze this rezoning application based on its merits. And so I want to seriously address every concern that I've heard raised and kind of offer my own unique perspective. So from where I sit, I see kind of 6 general categories of concerns being expressed. The first was around process and communication. Second was around exclusivity to Lac Alams members. The other was around property values, density, increase in traffic and parking, and then the location itself has come up quite a few times. So I want to go through each of those concerns with my own assessment based on all the information and evidence and everything we've heard from both sides. So the first concern around process, I mean, the mayor, the proponent, Councillor Niche, Councillor Cunningham, I think everyone here has made that point in relation to the actual process around the mailouts and Zoom meetings and public notifications in the newspaper, the big sign on the site that's been there for months, and the fact that we've had 2 public hearings, which, as far as I know, I don't think we've done in my time on council. But I think the most important point around those concerns raised around process, around the insinuation that somehow this is a done deal, that we've already seemed to make up our minds, or that we're trying to push this through. I wouldn't go quite as far as to say I'm insulted, but I do think that it's a little unfair for us to be accused of not being able to speak to people's concerns in the very forum that's specifically meant for us not to talk, but to actually listen to concerns. We haven't spoken as a council for a reason, and it's because, nobody's heard anyone on council speak against or in favor of this project, because we need to hear all sides before we make a decision. And so the body language I hope that I'm giving off in these types of meetings is that of taking copious amounts of notes. And I've got about 12 pages, 3,000 plus words. So I would say be careful what you wish for now that it's finally time for us to speak and render a decision after nearly 2 years. So it should go without saying, but I still think it is worth saying, is that the proponent does not speak for the city. But what is crystal clear from the neighborhood in this instance is that the communications expectations from the old development procedure bylaw is not good enough. That's been validated, I think, here tonight. So I'm hopeful that our work on creating and adopting the new development procedures bylaw back in January, I think the mayor used the phrase front-end load consultation. I think that change will hopefully pay dividends. And it's unfortunate that we couldn't go through this process in this particular instance. But nonetheless, 2 public hearings, I think we do have a very good understanding of the concerns. Now, the second concern around exclusivity to Lac Alams members, the question of why not allow everyone who needs housing. And to that concern, I would say it's important to take that issue up with the province, not with the proponent, not with the city. It's the provincial government's requirement based on the Indigenous Housing Fund, which the proponent has qualified for. And I think the obvious question is why. And there is a race-based issue baked into this, whether we want to be uncomfortable enough to acknowledge that or not. There is a long-standing and well-documented gap in well-being between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians, British Columbians, and even Rupertites. The data shows that Indigenous people are more likely to live in a household that is receiving government transfers. You're twice as likely to be in a low-income household. Unemployment rate is nearly double compared to non-Indigenous neighbors. Even for those with full-time employment, your average salary is $13,000 less. Indigenous people are disproportionately represented in homeless shelters and almost 2 times more likely to be in what's called core housing need, which is either, the percentage of income that you spent on rent or being in poor building conditions. And that well-being gap has persisted for decades. There's a whole separate debate about why and how and the circumstances that's led to it, as well as to how to deal with it. But the basic position is that targeted investments are necessary to deal with that well-being gap. And that's exactly what the province is trying to accomplish with the Indigenous Housing Fund. So I don't have any issue with that concern that's been raised. Now, the concern around property values, that I think the way that it was articulated was, surrounding property values would fall if this project was built for those properties that are pre-existing in the neighborhood. It's a very common argument that's used not just, I think, in affordable housing, but most types of developments when they're proposed in residential areas. We had the same experience with Five Corners Cannabis, with the Masonic Hall. Those are the two that kind of come to mind for me. But BC Housing obviously has a lot of experience dealing with this concern. And so I went digging and found a 2020 study that they just asked the very basic question: does non-market housing, like what's being proposed here, impact neighboring property values? And I think the results would surprise most people. The quote that I've copied is, for the majority of case study sites, median assessed values were consistent with or grew more than the trends for the surrounding municipality. Now, I wasn't really satisfied with that conclusion, because my first obvious thought, and probably many, is that data would be skewed towards the Lower Mainland, where there's a lot more investments by the province. I think it's fair for private homeowners to be worried about the impact on their private investment. I think that's reasonable. So when I looked into the specific case studies in Terrace and Prince George, the houses that were built within 500 meters of affordable residences, their property values grew about 70% over the 5 years after the affordable housing complex was built. The main conclusion to be drawn from that study is not that affordable housing makes neighboring property values rise or fall. It's that the macroeconomic factors of the community affect your property values way more than any localized ones. And I'm happy to share that study with anyone who wants to reach out to read that in a bit more detail. I think wrapped into that concern, though, around property values is just general desirability, which is, it's something that's subjective. Some people would rather have an undeveloped and treed lot beside them compared to any type of development, not just affordable housing. And that's fair. I can't argue someone's subjective preference. But, I do want to draw attention to a couple of the comparisons that were made, particularly in the petition that was against the project, used the Seal Cove Apartments as an example of the potential pitfalls of a project like this. And I wanted to draw a couple of distinctions on how I'm thinking about this project. The first, I think, which is probably the most important, is the proponent in this case is not an out-of-town owner with a numbered company that's trying to maximize their return on investment on a rental property. It's a local community that's trying to do right by their urban members who need a hand up in life. And second, wouldn't come as any surprise, but I mean, Seal Cove, the high density development down there, to put it nicely, it lacks character. It lacks any type of unique design element. They're rectangular boxes. This proposal, in contrast, it's architecturally designed. It takes advantage of the topography. It has a landscaping plan. It has massive, I think, 200-foot setbacks. And they're very, very obviously trying to express Loch Elam's cultural identity in the physical design. And then third, the other main distinction with Seal Cove is this proposal is located very close to the geographic center of our urban footprint, not on the very outskirts of town. And that fundamentally changes my analysis for density of this kind. The best comparison in town from my perspective is actually Metlakatla Cedar Village on the old King Ed site. And I really don't think that anyone in that neighborhood would want to argue that their home is less desirable now that that development has been completed. I really don't see anyone trying to take that position. And I think we all know that the quality of the landlord matters just as much as the property and the renters when it actually comes to the maintenance. So all that said, this argument around property values, it doesn't convince me to deny this proposal. The next one is density. So I think this is probably the main concern of substance, either around the number of people, the number of units, Light was one of them, noise was another, the building height. We're all kind of wrapped into this conversation around density. So for me, this conversation all comes down to, if we were talking exclusively bachelor suites for individuals, I would tend to agree that the project would not necessarily blend well with the neighborhood. But there is a really healthy mix of 1, 2, 3 bedroom studios and accessible studio apartments that are specifically designed for elders and for families. And that's a really important distinction. The physical design of the structure considers the topography of the site, and I don't find in those renderings that it's visually obtrusive, given the fact that it's set back to 200 feet from 11th Avenue, and only about half the building, or just over half, is above road grade. And to Councillor Nisha's point about any location being challenging, the other comment around light, I do want to note that we live in the rainiest and cloudiest city in Canada. So no matter where you build a building, it will always be a struggle to get natural light. So with that, I'm not convinced to vote against the proposal because of the proposed density. Now, getting to the one that I think has got the most number of comments around the traffic and the parking, speeding, drunk drivers, being a busy road and a blind hill. I'll start by comparing process, where I think no matter where a development of this scale is proposed, that is going to be a concern. There will be an increase in traffic. There's no doubt about it. And we have this very same concern with the new transition house on Park Avenue. In that case, you've got a highway designation. You're en route to the container port, to the ferry, to the Fairview docks, to the campground, and it's an arterial road to the entire west side. So in that case, and in this particular case, I really do rely on the experts, the engineering team at the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and McElhaney. And without being able to meet kind of those basic design baselines, it wouldn't have my support. But in this case, what's being recommended is a covenant to do the recommended works, the interventions that I hope will make that community safer from some of those concerns identified by residents. The curb extensions in particular, I do want to draw attention to, because they got some hate earlier on. And respectfully, all of the best practice data from all over the world disagrees with the insinuation that curb extensions are a stupid idea. They are proven to increase the visibility of pedestrians by improving sightlines. They reduce the crossing times for pedestrians, so you've reduced people's exposure to vehicles. They're proven to slow vehicle speeds both on the road as well as turning speeds, and they reduce illegal parking at crosswalks. So for me, I think that's a great mitigation, I think, and so does the data. Plus, it's funded by the proponent and not by local taxpayers, which I think is a win-win. So to the last concern around location, which we've heard a number of times, and that's either been expressed as a desire not to develop on a greenfield site. It's been expressed in logistical concerns around, site servicing, the insinuation that it's a swamp, or I think most acutely that there are other options available. So on the greenfield concern, Prince Rupert isn't some type of sprawling metropolis. And so when we try to take a whole of community approach, which we are elected to do, I come to the conclusion that the best way to achieve the objective of not creating some type of infinite sprawl of new neighborhoods is to add density within our existing urban footprint. One of the ways we've done that, and I've been a vocal supporter, is of creating what we called our urban containment boundary in our new official community plan. This site is not far from the geographic center of our footprint. It's very much preferable to add density to existing neighborhoods rather than trying to construct a brand new subdivision and destroy exponentially more habitat to house even less people. And I would also draw note to the fact that the proponents specifically has said in their value proposition that they want to try to be responsive to site. So on the greenfield concern, again, I'm left unconvinced to vote against. On the site servicing and logistics piece, This comes down to how did this site get selected? Water and sewer both to the lot line. That instantly increases the priority for development. We can't say that about lots of this size. The size of the cumulative amount of parcels that we're talking about is incredibly rare within our urban footprint, especially when you consider that it's not zoned parkland. You've already got an existing bus stop there. You don't have the upfront cost of land purchase, and you have numerous professionals, building architects, landscape architects, geotech, traffic, civic services, fire access. None of them are voicing red flags. And these are people who spend their day-to-day lives, their careers working on projects like this. So if they were raising hesitations and concerns and mitigation measures that we needed to take, I would be the first to jump on that bandwagon. And it's just not the case here. As Councillor Niche said, any type of lot that you're going to choose in Prince Rupert is going to have its own unique building challenges. And I'm not the expert, so I'm going to rely on the experts on that one. Now, the last piece that I want to address is this idea that 11th Avenue East is not the only option. And the way that I've heard that argument is people have basically said, you know, it's not the only option for expanding housing, and we should be exploring other options before we approve this one. And I think anyone who's been watching council the past few years will have seen us pursuing a wide variety of options. The ones I think about is, the new transition house on Park Avenue, working with Macola on Kootenay McKay, working with Metlakatla on the old King Ed site, former Neptune Inn, multiple approvals to the townhomes that are proposed on Drake Crescent. List goes on and on. To say that we're not active on the housing issue, it's just not accurate. All the evidence is to the contrary. So it sounds easy to say, why not just build on another vacant lot? Why not build on a vacant boarded up building somewhere else? The reality is that projects of this complexity, they take a lot of work to meet all the engineering, public works, Ministry of Transportation, and fire approvals. There are so many logistical difficulties to consider in any site: land ownership, site servicing, topography. It's so much more than just choosing any undeveloped lot at random. There's a lot who've taken this kind of choose another location argument to the extreme, saying that, you know, because there are other options, you should reject this one, go work on other ones before you come back to this. And to those people, I would say, of course, this is not the only option. I think of all those I just listed. You've got Cedar Village, 32 units, Anchor Inn, 46 units, Neptune Inn, 36 units, Transition House, 36 units, Raffles, 48 units, Drake Crescent, 42. Kootenay McKay is going to be 192 minus the 66 that are existing for a net gain of 126. That's 360 plus new housing units, over 400 if you include emergency shelter beds. So to say that we're not looking at or exploring other options, the evidence just does not support that accusation. And looking forward, you can point to our downtown tax incentive that is trying to encourage higher density development, housing development between Five Corners and City Hall. You can point to Digby Towers, the downtown gateway project at 3rd and McBride, potential subdivision at Silversides, and there may even be a future for Bill Murray or Kanata School. You never know. But the sad fact of the matter is even if all of those projects I just listed on the future horizon get done, it is still not enough to address how critical our housing shortage is. So this logic that we should reject a real project that's in front of us today because there may be other options tomorrow is faulty logic. The attitude downplays and even ignores the urgent scale and scope of the housing challenges that are being experienced right now today by members of our community. So in my opinion, it's a red herring to point to other options as a reason for opposition, because we are actively working on those other options at the same time. This is the option that's on the table for discussion because there's a local developer that's driving the application. The provincial funding is secured, the site's chosen, there's an associated construction plan. And I think it is worth mentioning that you compare this to rezoning applications from a few years ago. Nobody has expressed the concern that if this is approved, that shovels won't hit the ground. That used to be our biggest problem, was making sure that developers actually did what they said they were going to do. And that accusation hasn't been leveled once because this is a local development firm funded by a community of Lac Alams. And so I think that that's worth noting, the progress we've made in the last few years. I do want to engage in this red herring, though, for a second, because at the first public hearing in particular, there was this notion of some quick fix being one of the former school sites. Westview came up quite a few times. Anyone who will do just a couple of minutes of due diligence will learn that that property has a covenant on it, and it would take a provincial order and cabinet to change. Take that up with the school district. That's a project that I think everyone on council would love to see try to get Westview School active again in one way, shape, or form. Canada and Seal Cove sites, exact same thing, owned by School District 52, cost prohibitive to look at because of the cost of demolition, also requires significant upgrades to site services. And the same problem exists in other high density developments that have been mentioned, like Seal Cove. They're both on the outskirts of town. So you run into the same density problem. You have the same issues of traffic at Canada being right on a highway exit and a major arterial road. You have the same site servicing challenges at the Seal Cove School being at the end of a no-through road. So there is potential to redevelop them. And I think everyone on council will be willing to entertain those options. But the school district has got to be involved in this. And it's not the proposal that's in front of us for discussion. So converting boarded up buildings was another option that's been thrown out a couple times. In this case, again, land ownership matters. If they're privately owned with ridiculous inflated asking prices, you're very likely not going to get an affording housing development from a private developer who's trying to make a return on investment. If you're trying to build a whole series of smaller affordable housing units all across the town, it sounds great in concept, but all you're doing is increasing the cost per square foot significantly. So it's not going to be viable for BC Housing to actually invest. What hasn't, I don't think, been explicitly stated in this whole conversation is how time is truly of the essence on addressing this ongoing housing crisis. It's a massive consideration for how to deliver a project of this scale. When you consider who owns the land, how much time it takes for the planning to get shovels in the ground to occupancy, the site continually climbs the list. I mean, this is not up on the table for discussion for no reason. There's been a lot of work that's gone into it. There's also been some insinuation, or at least the questions around tax revenue would be due back to the city. And I think that if you read between the lines, it's, that we might be trying to push this through because of some type of financial returns to the municipality. I think you look at the lease value of $1 a year, I think that's demonstrably not the case, that we're trying to maximize our financial returns. But also, whether or not it was $1 a year or $10,000 a year in taxes, it would not change how any of us make a rezoning decision. We're trying to weigh the benefits versus the costs versus the mitigations versus everything that the technicians have said. We're elected to make decisions based on the public interest of the community as a whole. And there's a very difficult balance to strike between what's best for the community and what's best for a specific group of residents. So I hope, even for those in opposition, that they can see that I've really done my best to analyze this proposal on its merits. And I'll be able to justify, if people ask me why I voted a certain way, that I've tried to look at the evidence in front of me to make the best possible decision. Now, I apologize for being long-winded. I'm going to end my comments just with something that I think it got some coverage in the newspaper of these kind of competing petitions. And one thing really jumped out to me in a way that really struck a chord. The petition against, I'm going to quote here, it said, "There are things we hold dear that you cannot put a price tag on. Preserving natural beauty, building lasting community relationships and integration, the reason we've all chosen to live in this fantastic community to begin with." But going later in the petition, it basically said that approving this project would be, quote, "destroying the things that matter to Northerners the most." Now, it's possible for me to agree with everything in that first statement. I agree with absolutely everything. There is things that you can't put a price tag on. I live in Prince Rupert because I love how beautiful it is. I love the relationships that have been generated. But I've come to the opposite conclusion. I don't think that approving this project will destroy the things that matter to more Northerners the most, because what matters to me most, not just as a Northerner or as a Rupertite, but just a human being, is I want to make sure all of my fellow creatures have a safe place to lay their heads when the wind picks up and the rain comes down. I want to make sure that we can live in this very unique coastal rainforest climate by densifying within our existing footprint. And I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to find housing that's appropriate for them. So I'll end my comments this way, is just really to say thank you to everyone involved. Is whether you came out to the public hearing to voice your concerns, to ask questions, to endorse the project, ask for clarity, however you participated, Zoom meetings, written letters, emails, I just want to thank people for their time and their efforts to engage in this process. And I hope people can see that their input has made the project tangibly better. And I think my last thank you will be to the leadership and people of Lac Alams. I want to say to Ixipnum, thank you for being willing to take a significant risk with this project. Thank you for looking out for the housing needs of your community and our community. And so given everything I just said, I think everyone can see how I'll be voting on this application.
Thank you, Councillor Moreau. Wow. Councillor Skelton-Morburn, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't know if I can follow suit after such a powerful and moving speech. I think probably I'll first tend to the commentary regarding body language, as probably the most notorious person expressing the body language in this whole lineup. The reason being, for me, you hear things that, conflicting narratives. One of which, I think the one that struck me the most was that, you never know who a renter is going to be and who your neighbors are going to be and different things like that, while still complaining about the fact that it's exclusively Indigenous housing, and then some of the commentary around, I don't know whether or not I'm going to feel safe walking with my children and different things like that. So for me, the lenses and undertones that you hear in those pieces extremely upsets me. For me, hearing a lot of the disappointing kind of outpour and outcry of kind of just the disjustice and what it would do and how are we serving the collective of the community. If we were to treat each and every living person in this community like water will flow in a direction regardless of which way and which shape. It doesn't matter which type of water. However, when we move a huge chunk of people, whether they're registered to affiliated band or not, it will free up more housing for other people and ultimately alleviate the need that we so desperately need right now. I think for me, the handy thing about in-person public notices and public hearings especially is that we can kind of control the consumption of beverages and debauchery and different things like that when folks are at home, some of the more colorful language and some of the blatant disrespect towards the staff. For us as politicians, this comes with the territory. This is what we're used to. I signed up for this. I don't have thin skin or anything like that. This is what I signed up for, and I will accept the commentary and the disrespect and the anger and the outrage. What I will not expect is that they will speak to the staff, the proponents, and the working members of the staff, and also the ultimate disrespect towards Lac Alams and their governing council. Just for me, to call folks ridiculous and be out calling folks stupid and names and different things like that. Again, we can kind of control the what type of beverages and different things like that are consumed on things. On in person, it's very different at home, and I just want to express my disappointment on that. But I would want to also express my gratitude for the folks that have kind of still stayed and showed up and still had that opportunity to express their opinions and different things like that, and did so in a respectful manner. We can all find a difference of opinion and different things, and a lot of this job most times is balancing that tension of the opposites. A difference of opinion, how do we find that balance? You can't make everyone happy, as Councillor Adie, or do we call him Mr. Adie before, but he is Councillor Adie in this room, so we got to remind that that we can't make everyone happy, and this is definitely one of those decisions that can be challenging, and not everyone is going to walk out of this room happy with the decision that we've made, and I realize that wholeheartedly. I'd like to speak to Councillor Moreau's notion on the predisposition Indigenous peoples have in not owning homes. within their own territory. Yeah, for me, many folks know that I come from humble beginnings. A single parent. I grew up in BC housing. You know, some of my other colleagues may not feel the same way about this development as I do, and how intense it is, how firsthand and how relevant this is to me, and helping alleviate some of the burden many of my people and likewise nations kind of suffer from because of this and the lack of housing and the lack of development. Some folks have reached out and expressed kind of displeasure with some of my commentary ahead of time, which thus spoke to the predisposition of making that decision. Systemic racism does not need racists in the system for its system to perpetuate like that. All it needs is it to operate in the same way that it always has, that predispositions people to fall in through the cracks, the ones that need the housing the most. And for radical systemic racist systems to fall, sometimes it needs an action that is a little unorthodox. So for me to speak out in the ways that I have, perhaps expressing the body language that I have, and the blatant and disrespectful undertones of intolerance, and that just upsets me to no end. And I know that this will be sensationalized and we're going to take away from the main message today, and I am wholeheartedly okay with that, and nor will I choose to express my body language in a way that makes you feel a little safer. For me, just again, the blatant disrespect, I could not believe on a particular individual that spoke tonight, and the person knows who he is. For me, again, we need to find a way forward, and that collective way of coexistence is our way forward. And I want to thank each and every one of the Lackawanna Council members, and I'm looking forward to this development. And obviously, I am in favor of this development, and I just want to thank each and every one of my colleagues for the voice that they've brought to this. For me, again, obviously, this is a very heavy-hearted conversation coming from the beginnings that I do and knowing firsthand why this housing is needed. We wouldn't have had that same opportunity if that housing was there. So being able to sit in a seat like this and essentially sign the piece of paper that allows for more housing to be built for other people, I can't, excuse me, I can't express the feeling enough. I'm sure it's showing up on my face and perhaps my body language as well. But again, I just want to express my gratitude for having this opportunity of being selected by the people to scrape in by 165 votes in the last seat. And this is the turning of the tide, and this is only the beginning. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for that. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody on council for your very thoughtful and thorough comments. I definitely don't have anything to add specifically about this project. I think it was very well covered, and I would just be repeating everything at this point. But I will say, just around the process, I understand it's tough for community members who elect us. They want to see us as champions for them. But unfortunately, when it comes to rezoning projects in particular, we actually end up playing a more of an impartial, neutral role, which is frustrating for community members. And I've experienced this over my last 8 years because they expect it that we're supposed to go out of our way to express certain views or do something about this project. But really, we actually have to be fair. There was a time before the public administration when, way back a long time ago, mayors and councils could just dictate what happened whenever, and there was no process. If someone didn't like you on one neighborhood, they could just make something happen and turn off water to another group, and there was no fair process. And then they formed the public administration, and there was a separation between governance and administration, and then there was a local government act, and all of a sudden all these processes. So we're ruled by the provincial government, and the provincial government sets a set of rules around how we conduct ourselves, and around rezonings there's very specific rules and regulations, and we have to follow that. Everything we've done in this process is exactly almost to the T what every other community has to do in terms of its process. It may feel like we're not going out of our way to be communicative, but in fact, we do everything what we're supposed to be doing. In fact, we've gone above and beyond, even though some will never feel like we did do that. So I understand that frustration. One of the things we do have control over, though, is the development procedure bylaw, which we did make changes to in January based on experiences that we've had in the past, where when you do first and second reading, and then all of a sudden the public hearing's months away and people don't have a chance to have their say, Now what happens is before this project even comes to council, the developer or the proponent actually has to make that presentation to the community. And all of that engagement happens before council even reviews it now. And one of my suggestions now based on tonight too is that we, our planner joins that first presentation and does also a presentation on what the process looks like. Because most people, we live and breathe at a council level, development process all the time, rezonings, variances. So we understand those processes, but most people don't interact with that until they have to, until a project shows up in their neighborhood and a sign comes up. And this is the first time that they've ever had these interactions. And to them, it feels scary and it feels uncertain. And I understand that there's anxiety around that. So one of the ways we can alleviate that in the future is just to ensure that, we've already made the change now. This project didn't make the change. It was before we made that change. And there was nothing we could do to stop that at this point. But we can help that by ensuring there's education to the members, to the residents about how the development process works so that they understand there's a first, second reading, public hearing, third, final reading. There's referrals to ministries. Those referrals have to come back. There's a whole standard around how this all is conducted and that there's no ramming things through. In fact, there's actually literally written into the Local Government Act delays that have to happen so that the community has a chance to be notified. So we have to do 2-week notifications and then a public information, and then there's another reading, and then there's another 2-week notification, then there's a public hearing, and then we hear the concerns. And we can't be going around to residents and saying, oh, this is not going to happen, this is going to happen, and expressing how we feel, because the truth is we don't know how we feel until, like Councillor Moreau said, there's a public hearing, until such time as we actually hear from everybody. And I'll be honest with you, we've received hundreds of comments on this project. So if you think about it from our perspective for a moment, we take all realities and they get downloaded onto us from all sides of every spectrum of belief. For anything, to be honest with you, all of society's problems, whether we're responsible for them or not, council deals with more than just what we're responsible for. We deal with all the problems of society. In fact, we're in the trenches, and then there's higher levels of government who don't necessarily have to deal with the on the ground issues. But we see everything every day. We're in the grocery stores with you. We're your neighbors. We're having coffee with you. We're at the restaurants with you. Our kids go to school together. I mean, we are in this community. Every problem that affects you affects us. We're literally your neighbors, just making sure that this town can be better. That's why we run for office. That's why we get elected. And there's another election coming up next year. And I hope there'll be more people that want to come forward and put their names out there and be part of the solution, because that's what we're trying to bring forward here. But ultimately, we have to maintain respect for each other because we are community members and we're just residents trying to do our best as well. So I do understand where that anxiety comes from when something new happens in your backyard, and we are responsible for making that decision. And I hope tonight's discussion helps those who might not be in favor of this project understand that we are very thoughtful and we are not blind to issues, and that we do hear people, and that there is everybody's voice counts, and that we literally have taken pages and pages of notes, and I have everybody's name who said something with an associated comment, and I have reviewed those thoroughly, and we weigh the pros and cons, and we weigh the needs, and we do these things not in isolation or in a silo, but we do it in a holistic manner. Moving forward, I think we have a much better process outlined. We have a better OCP that's way more streamlined. I think we'll have a better opportunity to make changes to controversial developments before they even get into a reading position with council, so that the developers know what they need to change right out the bat. That's going to be a huge difference. The community is going to have nothing but a chance to have those engagements now moving forward. But we are here where we are now. A lot of the arguments have been made. And ultimately speaking, this project's going to alleviate a massive need for the community. And I personally do not feel like I wouldn't be doing my job as mayor if I didn't support this project. So I do support this project based on all the feedback we've been given. Councillor Moreau did a great job, I believe, at technically breaking down the arguments. I agreed pretty much with every point he made. And you also did a very well researched comparison around the data around some of those issues, which, you know, I think people who are in the public hearing don't believe we do this type of work, but this is literally our jobs. This is why we are on council, and it's our job to be intimately familiar with the details of these projects. But it's also our job to make sure that you're being heard, and I think we did our due diligence on that. And again, I don't think everyone's going to agree with our decision, but it sounds to me like we are moving it forward in one way based on the comments tonight. And so I am definitely in support of this, and I think it's time to start moving forward in the community. So if there's no further discussions for this tonight, I'd call a question. Is there anyone opposed to the resolution? Okay, that motion is carried. So Mr. Buchan, perhaps you could quickly just outline what the next steps are for this project, because right now we approved third reading, not final reading, and there's a couple more things that need to happen before this project is finalized. Is it possible you can explain what happens next?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The two major steps. First, the bylaw will be sent to the Ministry of Transportation and Highways for their approval, and concurrent with that process, we will be finalizing the restrictive covenant, which basically puts into place all those traffic measures that we discussed. So once that bylaw is that covenant's being signed and we have an undertaking for its registration, we can bring the whole thing back to council for adoption. Consideration of adoption.
So there'll be a delay now between then and now, and so just so the community residents understand, now that the public hearing is over, by law, council cannot engage with residents around this topic anymore until such time as this bylaw is passed at final. So if you come up to us and try to have a chat with us, we'll have to tell you that we can't talk to you about it now until it's complete, and that is a legal obligation from our end. So just to be aware of that. Other than that, the resolution has passed. I'll move it on to any reports, questions, or inquiries from members of council. Councillor Eadie.
Yeah, I feel I have to take a deep breath and pause for a second, but I won't. In light of the unusually intense rainfall in the last week and a half or so, and some of the impacts that I know are the subject of public awareness in terms of some of the public facilities and what have you. I'm just wondering if we could get a summary from staff on what some of the key events were as a result of the rainfall and what the implications are moving forward for the city. I suppose in terms of two things. One, what is it that we are going to need to be doing? And two, if there are any cost implications. I imagine there probably are. If we have maybe an early sense of what that looks like.
Mr. Pucci, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Eadie. Yes, so we did experience some significant rain events and some flooding. So the Lester Center did have flooding both Monday and Tuesday night. We reviewed what happened there, and it was the result of a backed up storm drain near the auditorium level. The water's been pumped out, and we are in the process of assessing the damage and looking for what repairs are required, if it's just a dry out situation or if there are actual repairs, and then we will ensure that drainage area is well equipped to handle more rain events like that. But we believe it was just because it was backed up from being clogged. But there was other issues throughout the community. So our golf course had two bridges affected during the flooding event. One was removed completely from its abutment, and the other one was lifted and put back down. They're both being assessed by a structural engineer. One will definitely need significantly more work than the other. I believe the other one is been approved for pedestrian access already. there was a landslide that happened on Wantage Road. The road is closed. We would like to steer any of the public away from that area. It's quite dangerous. So we are working with the DFO, the people from the hatchery, and Flynn Rowe on removal of that slide, and then we will work together on restoration of the area. But it did occur right across from the hatchery as you go onto Wantage Road. There was small floodings in road drainage throughout the community. We asked that the community assist in removing leaves and debris when those CBs catch basins get clogged, and a lot of people did. I saw people out there doing it, which was great, which sort of alleviate all of the water. But at some point they do sort of back up, and we get slight road flooding. But after the rain subsides, it takes it away, so the roads can handle a lot of that extra water. The industrial site did see some pretty significant flooding down on the lower end of Michel Road. The entire road was overturned with water. We need to do some more ditching in that area to alleviate the water and move that down and out into the ocean. We also saw that our wastewater treatment facility had some flooding in there, but we were able to catch it pretty quickly and make sure that there wasn't any releases of any untreated material. We had some flooding on the pathways in McClymont Park that will require some restoration of the pathway. Several houses in the community confirmed minor flooding. A lot of them will be going through insurance, and so when we get calls, we point them towards insurance. Bob's on the Rocks saw some significant flooding, but at this time I don't believe that there is any property damage down there. We saw a bunch of trees come down behind the crow's nest, so we will be doing some selective tree clearing and removing the dangerous trees that are hung up in that area to ensure that it's safe. At this point, we're still assessing all of the damage, and we are putting together costs for repairing, so I can prepare those and have something for council about what we envision that to look like. And then also we'll look for upgrades in the 2022 budget, and or what we can do with the current budget to look towards the rainy season and try and get the water moving a little bit quicker in certain areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there other comments from or any queries from the council? Councillor Cunningham.
Just two quick things. Councillor Neeson, my favorite topic, the line painting. I guess the lines that weren't painted before the onset of fall and winter won't get painted in the spring now, because there's quite a few roads in town with no lines. Is there any timeline when that will be done?
So the line painting crew will be back here. There's a weather window coming up in the next couple days. I've been informed that they're going to come and focus mostly on all of the school zone areas to ensure that those ones are fresh. And then if there is time and weather windows, that they will complete other lineage around town. But we've asked them to focus immediately on all the school zone areas. Unfortunately, again, some of the times that they were available just weren't the best times for us.
Okay. And the one other thing is next council meeting, October 25th, I just want the residents of Prince Rupert to know that Northern Health is coming before council to answer any questions that council may have. So if anyone has any questions or concerns about healthcare or a hospital, they can either send a question to myself or anyone on council to be asked. And the sooner they do it, the better, because we have to give Northern Health the questions ahead of time. Just a lot of people have a lot of questions and concerns, and there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and I think it's a good time to put some of them to rest and answer a lot of questions. So I'm hoping people will actually come forward instead of just putting things out on Facebook and not getting any answers. Okay, that's
Thanks,
it.
Councillor Cunningham. Any further reports from council? Councillor Scott Morvan.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add to just thank the staff for their work on the files regarding housing and different things like that. We've got, as Councillor Moreau had mentioned, we have multiple files kind of across the community, as well as major projects and different things like that. So again, I just want to acknowledge the staff for their service and their dedication to this work. For me, you know, I just want to speak to just the heavy-heartedness of some of the commentary before. I think it's extremely important for us to serve with a lens of compassion and serve that collective, the community. Part of that is meeting that core need of housing and preventing that the chains of intergenerational traumas to hold down the vast majority of our population, which is of Tsimshian descent on the Coast Tsimshian communities, as well as a vast majority that are also Nisga'a members as well. I think for me, coming from both of those roots, residing and living in and having the opportunity to serve in an urban government, I just again want to thank the community for this opportunity, but again, express the heavy-heartedness of some of this. But for me, just to understand for the folks that I may have kind of scorned a little bit on some of their commentary, to understand that the main mission and vision of a lot of these things is an opportunity to educate, for us to build that bridge and that bridge of coexistence and in a loving and inclusive relationship as we are as a community. And I think that's our way forward. And a lot of that requires we'll be meeting the needs of the housing of the collective of the community. And I think even though this is an exclusive property, this will alleviate a lot of the housing stress and strains. So I will leave it on that note and just kind of send all of my kind of love and well wishes to each of you as we kind of navigate through this pandemic and this crisis and different times, and speak to those at home that are in need of this housing critically, the families and children especially. Know that there are 35 units and 35 families that will be able to meet that need with this housing project, as well as the others that will be able to reside there as well, freeing up other places and freeing up other spaces so that we don't have 3-4 generations living in a 3-bedroom apartment like we do right now, where a lot of those complaints kind of are directed towards folks like myself, those that know that I come from the background that I do, have more comfort and safety approaching me rather than some of my colleagues. So maybe some of my colleagues may not have heard some of these narratives and why it's so heavy for me firsthand. So again, I just want to thank the staff, the proponent, the Lac Ouellam's governing council, as well as the other nations that have put in applications for housing developments and other private sector owners as well. I think we can work towards this as a community together, but we need to find that compromise. And I think that's going to take a lot of conversations, a lot of education, and a lot of tough and challenging and heart-filled conversations like we did today. And I just thank each and every one of you as my colleagues just for the favor of the motion so that we can kind of alleviate some of that pressure and serve the collective with a lens of compassion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, you, Councillor. Any further reports from council? Okay, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn and reconvene our recessed in-camera meeting. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Ranhawa. Anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, you guys can stay on the line. Thank you very much for the folks at home listening here. We'll see you guys at our next meeting. Thank you.